This is Audible.
Macmillan Audio presents Fallen Crest Nightmare by Tijan. Read for you by Saskia Marleveld.
Chapter 1. Samantha's senior year at Kane University. The pumpkin had a penis. I was sure of it. I angled my head to the right, and yep, there was definitely a thick root growing out of the pumpkin's bottom. I angled my head to the left. Still there. I wasn't sure about touching it, but then again, it was a pumpkin. I was pretty sure no swimming seeds were going to explode from the thick root, so I used my toe to tip it onto its back, and eureka! The root grew out and pointed upward. "What are you doing?" I jumped. Heather had come out of nowhere, and I rounded on her. "Announce your presence before you start speaking. You could give someone a heart attack." Heather, one of my best female friends in Fallen Crest since high school, lifted an eyebrow. Her hand went to her slim hip. She gave me an "are you serious" look, but only pursed her lips and shrugged. "There a spider or something on that thing?" In some ways, we were opposites. Heather had dirty blonde hair, a deep-throated and sultry-sounding voice, and heavily made-up eyes, while I had black hair and dark eyes, and I was pretty sure my voice sounded normal. What we did have in common was our slender build. We were both thin, though Heather had a few more pounds than me. "Look at it." I used my toe to point at the root. "Does that look like what I think it does?" She snorted, then turned to check out the rest of the pumpkins in the field. "It looks well endowed. Give it to Logan. He'll be giggling like a schoolboy who got his first dirty magazine." She thought about it. A schoolboy who doesn't have a self-conscious bone in his body. I grunted. Her assessment of my stepbrother was dead on. Logan had a girlfriend now, one that was his perfect fit, but before that he'd been the biggest man-whore since he was in high school. Logan and I were in our last year at Kane University. Heather had finished school last year at a local college, but was up visiting this weekend. It was Halloween. It was party time. Granted, Logan tended to embrace it more than the rest of us, but this weekend was going to be one big Halloween party. We were starting with a girls' night tonight, and that meant no Logan, no guys at all. There'd be pumpkin carving, costumes, and drinks. Lots and lots of drinks. Logan's girlfriend Taylor was joining, and so were two of my friends from the cross-country team. It was our night, and we were even going to gossip. See, we were girly. Gossiping wasn't our usual thing to do, but we were embracing our ovaries this weekend. I was fairly certain Logan and whoever he had in tow would try and scare us, and Heather would throw a wine bottle at them. That was my guess, but I wasn't really thinking about today or tonight. I was salivating over tomorrow. Mason was coming to town. Yes, him, my soulmate, Logan's brother, my other half. At the mere thought of him, I was already throbbing between my legs. Goddamn, I loved him. He'd been by my side since I moved into his and Logan's house my junior year in high school. My mom had cheated on my dad with their dad, and there was this whole family drama that ensued. So to say I wasn't happy would have been an understatement. I went a little mental that year, running for hours on end, throwing fireworks into my dad's car, realizing how much I hated my mom. I hadn't been the happiest at the thought of living with Mason and Logan Cade either. I'd pegged them as wealthy and privileged pricks, since they were treated like gods in Fallen Crest. Guys either wanted to be their friends, wanted to be them, or hated them with a passion. The girls, well, I'm sure that's obvious. Mason was gorgeous. Tall, broad shoulders, slim waist, a body that was sculpted to perfection. And it wasn't even from trying. It was just from him being mouth-wateringly gorgeous, and from training for football. They kind of adopted me as their family, and I became Mason's lover. I was his in every sense of the word, and Logan became just as protective of me. For a few years, it was the three of us against the world. There were others, like Mason's best friend, Nate Monson, and then Heather. But it was always the three of us. And to an extent, it still was. No one could touch what we had. And tomorrow, we were all going to be together once again. Mason was in Los Angeles for a football game. He was playing tonight, and then he'd travel to Kane on Friday. We'd have a full weekend together. I almost groaned. It had been 2 weeks since I had last seen him, and I wanted him here now, but one more day. I kept telling myself that, trying not to count the hours on the clock. One more day. Actually, half a day. Maybe I could get super drunk tonight, and that'd make the time go faster. No. Even as I half entertained the thought, I knew I couldn't. There'd be booze, Heather, Taylor, Courtney, Grace, and me, plus pumpkins and carving tools, and I knew Logan would show up somehow. It wasn't a recipe to get blitzed out of my mind. I'd need to stay alert tonight. Sam! I looked back, realizing that Heather had moved on without me. Yeah? She waved to the wheelbarrow she was holding, filled with pumpkins. I got enough of these things for tonight, and the party tomorrow. Come on, let's head out. We'd been tasked with collecting them not just for carving tonight, but also for a party that Logan was throwing on Friday night. He was partially doing it in Mason's honor, but also because it was Halloween, and it was our last year of college. Logan was finding any excuse to throw a party this year. If I sneezed and the snot came out gold, he would throw a party to celebrate it. I shook my head, making my way down the row to where Heather was paying for all the pumpkins. The penis one was on top. Really? I looked at it. The thick root was sticking straight up. It had been pointing toward the air before, but now it was curved back against the pumpkin. She grinned. He's happy to see you. I wanted to make you feel special. A pumpkin has a boner for me. Special doesn't describe how I feel. But I was grinning too. After the clerk handed her the receipt, we made our way back to her truck. Heather had offered to drive. My little Corolla had bit the dust that summer, and Mason had been letting me drive his black Escalade. He'd gotten a brand new one as a present from his manager, and he was driving that in Massachusetts, where he was playing for the New England Patriots. For the weekend, he'd left his new one back there, and I'd cleaned his old one this week for him. He kept asking how it was doing. I wasn't the only one he was missing. She set down the wheelbarrow, then opened the truck's bed. I grabbed the thick root and used it to pull the pumpkin into the back of the truck. Moving to grab the next one, I asked, "What's the plan tonight?" Heather was helping, grabbing for her second one too. Logan's party is at the other house, right? I nodded. He's renting it. He didn't want to do damage to ours. Okay, so yes. We drop the pumpkins we want at your house, then drop the rest off at the one he's renting. I figure we can keep 6 for us, 5 girls, maybe an extra for Logan to carve tomorrow, or tonight if he crashes girls' night. She shrugged. Or hell, we can just have one on hand for him to smash if he wants. That was good thinking. Is Channing coming up tomorrow night? I grabbed for my 8th pumpkin. We were halfway done. She grabbed 2 at a time, placing them gently in the truck. She grunted from the effort, then repeated the process. Yeah, he's coming up, but more to see Mason than me. She bit off her sentence, and I frowned. I reached for another 2, but I was a wimp. She was grunting from grabbing the bigger pumpkins. I grabbed 2 small ones. That bad? Something going on with you two? Mason, Logan, and I had grown up in Fallen Crest, a small town on the northern coast of California. Heather still lived in Fallen Crest, which was a full 3-hour drive from Kane University. In high school, she'd always managed her father's bar and grill, Manny's, and now she was running it full-time. Her boyfriend, or on-and-off-again boyfriend, Channing, lived there too. Well, he lived close by in Rousseau, Fallen Crest's rival, a neighboring town that was further inland. Fallen Crest was filled with upper to middle-class families, with a huge proportion of millionaires and billionaires. Rousseau was mostly blue-collar families, and for some reason the people from that town were rough and tough. Mason and Logan had tangled with some of them on more than one occasion, and most times the end result was spilled blood, if they were lucky. I suppressed a shiver. There'd been a couple of times I felt like I'd gotten out of Rousseau with my life barely intact. But Channing ran his own bar in the town, and he'd become friendly with Mason and Logan because of my friendship with Heather. He was the sunrise and sunset type of love for her, which, seeing that she still hadn't answered my questions, spoke volumes. We had 3 pumpkins left, and I stilled. "I'm sorry." She swallowed, looking pained, and shrugged a shoulder. "It's... whatever." She grabbed the last 3 and tossed them roughly onto the pile. As she took the wheelbarrow away, I ran a hand over the 3 pumpkins. All were still intact, but I cast a worried glance at my friend. She was the toughest girl I knew. She rarely showed when she was angry, and my stomach sank. This wasn't good. Not at all. She bypassed me, her long legs keeping a brisk pace. "Come on. The quicker we get to drinking, the better." I hopped in the passenger seat, threw my seatbelt on, and sat back. She peeled out of the parking lot, and I had a feeling tonight was going to be worse than I'd imagined. Chapter 2. Heather was just as brisk when we pulled up to Logan's party house. He and his friends were turning it into a haunted house. Word had already spread around campus, and I knew half the school would be attending. It was going to be huge. A Logan Cade party, plus the fact that Mason Cade was going to be there, meant only a social recluse would want to miss out. I wasn't going to let Mason out of my sight the whole time he was here. He'd moved to Massachusetts in June. It was now the end of October. I'd spent most of the summer there, but cross-country had taken every weekend from me. I flew down there on random overnight trips, but it wasn't enough. It never was. I didn't care if Logan was hoping for some brotherly bonding time, or if the guys wanted to do something just for the guys. It wasn't happening. "Yo!" Logan came out of the front door, down the steps, and over to the truck. His hair was messy, but he ran a hand through it, shaking it out, and I knew he'd left it that way on purpose. It suited him. His dark eyes were almost gleaming from whatever he'd been planning, but the look waned when Heather ignored his greeting and started unloading the pumpkins on the front lawn. He slowed to a stop, his eyes finding mine with an unspoken question in them. I shrugged. I knew what was wrong with Heather, but I didn't have to say anything. Logan was smart. He'd figure it out as soon as he saw Channing tomorrow night, if not before. With Heather in this mood, and knowing Logan was generally an in-your-face kind of guy, I was more worried the two would get into a fight tonight. I saw all the tequila she had stored in the back seat for later. "Hey," I gestured to the house. "It looks great already. A good spot for a haunted house party." He glanced back, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I thought so too." I heard the pride in his voice. "Saw this place driving around one night and got a realtor to look into it. The owners were thinking of renovating it, but I twisted their arm." He grinned at me. "Everything's sound, so no one will be falling through the floors or anything." I considered the 3-story house. It was old. So much of the white paint was scraped off that it looked like it had been intended to be a black house, and the front walkway was so cracked, only a few of the slabs were still there. The rest was grass that had grown out and over the remaining rocks. As long as it was safe, I guessed I didn't care. "No cockroaches?" He shook his head. "They had it inspected. No mold, either." Heather stopped for a second and looked at the house, too. "Just spiders. And a few rats, I'm sure." Her gaze swept to Logan at the last word, and she lingered a moment before turning back for more pumpkins. Logan's eyes narrowed. His mouth firmed in a line. "What's your problem? I haven't done shit to you." His hands came out and he crossed his arms over his chest. She paused, reaching back into the truck's bed, and her eyes jumped to mine. I saw regret before she grumbled out, "Nothing." Her hand closed around the pumpkin, and it was soon placed in the pile with the others. Logan opened his mouth. I knew he wasn't going to say anything nice, so I jumped forward. "Hey," I suggested to Heather. "You can take a break. We'll finish the rest." Her eyes darkened, but I saw the relief in them, even though her shoulders remained rigid. "Thank you. I think I will." She ignored Logan, digging into her pockets as she headed for the sidewalk by the road. Logan watched her go, his jaw clenching for a moment. "What's her problem?" His eyes swung back to mine, dark and angry. "She just took a shot at me, and I haven't done anything to earn it." He lightened his tone, a crooked grin showing. "Now, if I've done something against her, then have at it. I apologize for being a dick." I waved him off, leaning in for the rest of the pumpkins. "Don't worry. I don't think it was actually meant toward you." His eyes were studying me, and a second later he nodded. "Got it." He walked over to where Heather had been standing and took 4 pumpkins at once. "Her and Channing must be fighting." He didn't wait for an answer, but took the pumpkins to the front porch and disappeared inside. A second later he hollered, "Pumpkins are outside! Come and help bring them in!" A line of guys came out. No one questioned him. No one barked back. No one even looked like they considered not doing what he ordered. They all just came out one by one, picked up a pumpkin from the pile in the yard, and carried them inside. I had the last 2 in my arms, but one of the guys moved to grab them from me. He paused when he realized he would be grabbing where he shouldn't, and flashed an apologetic grin. "Sorry. I'll take them in if that's okay." I nodded slowly and held them out one at a time. He scooped them up, and soon all the pumpkins were gone. Remembering our own for the night, I whirled around. 3 guys were reaching for the last pile, and I held my hand out. "Stop. Leave 6 of them for us. Those are for us." "Oh." All of them paused. Then one counted the remaining pumpkins and pointed to the 2 already being held. "Just put those 2 back. Leave the 4 in the truck." Logan had come back to stand next to me, and he waited till everyone went inside. Heather was sitting on the curb, the smoke from her cigarette wafting in the air. She was resting her hand next to her, her cigarette pointing upward, until she took a drag from it. "She looks ready to rip into anyone with genitals." I gave him a look. He corrected himself. "Anyone with a dick and balls." I nodded. "Sounds about right." I clapped him on the arm. "Looks like you've got it all taken care of. It's girls' night tonight. We're at our house. That means you're not." "Oh, yeah?" He snorted, raking a hand through his hair again. "I'm staying at a friend's." I understood his dilemma. Taylor would sleep at our house, where they usually stayed, but she didn't live full-time with us. She might as well have, because she slept there almost every night. But her place of residence was still technically her father's. Unlike the rest of us who had moved here for school, Taylor had moved back to Kane after a gruesome end to 2 years at her first college. Her father was one of the football coaches for Kane University, a Division I league school, and he was a big deal. Known for being wild and yelling at the games, her dad got the nickname Coach Bruiser, but he was just Bruce, or Taylor's dad, to the rest of us. I smirked. "I figured you'd sneak in at some point." "Nope." He grinned. "It's a girl's house tonight. I'm respecting it. The guys and I are going to watch Mason's game tonight anyways. We thought about driving down, but we'll see him tomorrow. It's not like we don't go to any of his games." I knew what he meant. I hadn't been able to see that many because of my training, but I just had 1 more year, and then I could see all the games I wanted. But that was me, not Logan. He'd been to a bunch of Mason's games, and this weekend was all about the Halloween festivities. I remarked, "Maybe I'll see if I can put it on in the background tonight." Either way, you guys will have fun. He turned back to studying Heather again. Looks like she'll need some female friends tonight. Channing's coming tomorrow night. I know. I frowned at his wry tone. You know something I don't? Nope. My frown deepened. His response was quick, too quick, and he moved a little so he wasn't facing me anymore. Out with it, I said. Now. Sam, now. He sighed, rolling his eyes. You're a pain in the ass. I'm your stepsister and future sister-in-law, so you have to tell me. Family loyalty. He snorted. That's what we're calling it? I knew what he meant. Mason, Logan, and me. It was the three of us, always and forever. I softened my tone. Come on, tell me. Like you were going to tell me, right? But I heard the surrender in his voice. He was going to spill the details. Channing called Mason last night, and Mason called me. He wanted to know if Heather was coming to the party tomorrow night. Wasn't sure that he'd come if she was. What? I was fighting not to let my jaw drop. Channing and Heather fought, but this sounded like it was on a whole other level. He broke it off with her, something about his sister. I went back to frowning. Heather had mentioned his sister and some problems with her last year. I thought all of that was done. Who knows? Neither of them really confide in us, right? He was eyeing me, and I moved my head in acknowledgement. It wasn't that Heather didn't trust me. It was just that neither of us really talked about our issues. If something happened, we dealt with it. If we had to cry, we did. If we needed to get drunk to take our mind off things, we did that too. If we needed to go dancing to help keep things at bay, it was known to happen. Heather had been there for me during a bad time last year, and if she needed to talk, she knew I'd be there for her too. We fought for each other, but we just weren't the type of friends to sit and spill our guts, not unless we really needed to do it, or it'd literally rip us apart. Heather had lit a second cigarette, but I knew what we needed to do tonight. Okay, I said to Logan. If you had plans to scare us tonight, don't. My eyes were on Heather as I kept talking. This might turn out to be a Ninja Sam night, or a Dancing Sam night. I heard him chuckle. Those nights are fun. The reasoning behind them, not so much, but the actual Drunken Sam moments? He grinned. Priceless. Heather, it's time for us to take off. Heather finished up her cigarette and joined us. I added, winking at Logan, it's tequila night tonight. God, yes, Heather groaned, resting against the truck next to us. She lifted her head up, her chin jutting out toward Logan. Sorry about being a bitch earlier. I'm sure you know why. He shrugged. It'll work out, you know that. She grunted. Not sure about that. Not this time. She pulled out her keys and went to the driver's side. Ready, Sam? Ready. I flashed my stepbrother a grin before going to the passenger door. See you tomorrow. His words were low. Call if you need anything. I knew his meaning. Heather was part of our family. We took care of each other. I nodded to him and climbed into the truck, and a second later we were off again. Tequila night was about to commence. Chapter 3. I pulled out the first bottle and placed it on the table. We already had the rest of the ingredients in the middle. Courtney, Grace, Taylor, and Heather all stood around the table. Courtney and Grace's eyes widened at the sight of the full bottle, then trailed to the bag and the rest of the booze in there. A wary look came over Taylor's face, but Heather was focused on the bottle and nothing else. We are drinking this tonight. I was channeling Logan. The best motivational speech voice I could summon came out, low and suggestive. We are going to do this bottle proud. Courtney and Grace nodded. Yes. Grace licked her lips. Proud. So proud. Courtney was nodding right along with her. Taylor swallowed, then sighed. Okay, this is what Logan warned me about, huh? But she wasn't asking. She already knew. I said, "We are going to pay homage to the tequila gods tonight. We are going to kneel at their altar, lick their balls, stroke their members." My hand rubbed up and down the bottle's neck. Courtney and Grace shared a look, cringing, but faced me again. Their shoulders rolled back and Courtney clapped her hands. "Let's do this." Grace let out a war whoop. "Yeah!" Taylor took a breath and held it. I raised the bottle up, then lifted it high. "May we make you proud tonight." Then I opened it up, licked some salt, took a shot, and bit down on a lime wedge. As I felt the burn, Heather took the bottle from me and tipped her head back. She did the same, taking more than a couple shots. When she was done, the bottle was passed around again. The salt was licked, the tequila was downed, the limes were bit into. I grabbed the stereo remote and soon "Party Till We Die" by Timmy Trumpet filled the air. The bottle had gotten around to Taylor by now, and I was on deck. Courtney and Grace were both cringing and coughing, but they were waiting, just like me and Heather. After my second shot, when it was going around a second time, Heather took her double dose and passed the bottle, then leaned over to me. "Thank you." I nodded. She didn't need to say anything else. She wanted to forget whatever shit was going on, and that was my mission. We were going to get shit-faced. When Grace was handing the bottle off to Taylor, I said, "Another 2 times around. We need to finish the bottle, and then we can move on to mixed drinks." Courtney stuck her tongue out, shaking her head as Taylor took the tequila from her. "I thought tonight was about wine and gossip, and weren't we going to do something Halloweenish too?" I shrugged. The pumpkins were still on the porch. "That's the second round of events. Costumes, and then heading out and dancing." Taylor moaned, finishing her shot, and slid the bottle across the table toward me. "Tell me this is the only round, please." I beamed at her, snatching up the bottle. "Nope. Mixed drinks." Then I tried to do a Heather and inhale 2 full shots at once. God damn, that burned. I couldn't hold in my own moan, but Heather took the bottle. She drank and continued drinking. The rest of the girls went from being surprised to understanding. "Oh," I heard a quiet murmur from Grace. "No." Heather pointed at each of them. "I don't want your fucking pity." Taylor asked softly, "What do you want from us?" "This." Heather took another shot, and even I was wincing. I was pretty sure we were already beyond what was a healthy amount to drink. She finished and blindly shoved the bottle in Courtney's direction. "I don't want to talk about it. I don't want lectures or speeches or inspirational pep talks. I want to get fuck-faced enough where I might actually get fucked on my face tonight." Grace grimaced, blinking rapidly at the same time. "That sounds painful, confusing, and strangely erotic at the same time." She gave me the last of what was left in the bottle. "I think I'm turned on." There wasn't much left, and before I could down it, Heather took it. She finished it, then put the bottle in the middle of the table. "Phase 1. A silent burp came out. "Complete." Her eyes were raw, and the wall that hid her emotions was gone. I just saw the pain there as she whispered, "Next, please." My arms lifted as if to hug her, but she saw them and her eyes hardened. "No." That one word kept me from reaching for her, and I lifted both to indicate the kitchen. I felt like I was an air traffic controller with that move. "And everyone shuffle to the right. Long Island iced teas." I sang the drink's name, and instantly they all relaxed into smiles. Everyone loved a Long Island iced tea. How could they not? We probably didn't need them, but who cared? I wanted us to figure out costumes before the shots hit our minds. If not, we might end up clubbing in just underwear and bras, thinking we were underwear Wonder Woman or something. I didn't want to worry about our pictures ending up in a sleazy tabloid. I was Mason Cade's girlfriend. I never knew where or when someone might try and sell a photo of me. "Okay, I set out all the ingredients. Everyone make your own drink, and then explore the house to find a Halloween costume. We're going dancing after this? Taylor asked. I nodded. Did your other friends want to come? Jason might. He might go somewhere else, but he can drive us there if we need a driver. I'd planned on an Uber, but I was okay with that, at least this early in the night. Sounds good. We can cab it home. Heather stepped outside, leaning against the wall, and reached in her pocket for her cigarettes. Taylor said, Logan told me. Nope. I wasn't going to be that friend who talked about another friend the second they stepped away. I had earlier with Logan, but that was different. Taylor wasn't like that either, so she wasn't gossiping to be hurtful, but this could hurt Heather. If it had been me, I would have felt there'd been enough talk by now. Talking wasn't even necessary at this point. I said, I need to make my own drink too. Yeah. Taylor flashed me a grin. Me too. We both reached for our glasses when Courtney and Grace stopped laughing. They had moved into the living room with their iced teas in hand. Hey, Sam, Courtney said. Yeah, I said. She gestured upstairs. Any rooms that's off limits for us? For the costumes? I exchanged a look with Taylor. Go to Nate's. Definitely go to Nate's room. Mason and his best friend Nate had lived with Logan and me last year. The two graduated, but their rooms and their things were still here. It was like a second or third home for both of them. I knew they'd be back often enough for visits, so it didn't make sense to clean everything out. So most of Nate's things had been left behind in his room. They started giggling again, then Courtney coughed, trying for a stern face. And where is that room? The tequila had officially arrived. The first bedroom. There's a guest room, then a bathroom. The door that opens to another set of stairs is Logan's. Don't go in there. Thank you, Courtney waved as they headed up. Taylor dropped her voice, even though no one was in the room. I'm not sure what Logan left out on the bed from last night. He got, creative. I finished my tea and shook my head. I don't need to hear about Logan's creativity. I was trying to hold back a laugh. She didn't hold hers back. I'm going to grab something quick to wear. I'll help those other two. Should we dress them in Nate's underwear? I think that's more the dilemma I'm torn about. She started for the stairs, but paused. It's not like he'll see them being used. He's in Boston, too. The clock said 7:33. Nope. He should be in the Los Angeles Stadium right about now. He's coming back with Mason tomorrow. That's right. I forgot about the game. She looked at the television. We could have watched the game tonight. Nah. I just smiled. It was girls' night tonight. She seemed to understand, and her eyes darkened. Hey, She flicked a glance to where Heather was still standing outside. I didn't mean to come off like I was gossiping before. Thanks for not participating. The words were out before I realized what I said. That's fine. And it was. Taylor wasn't like that. Courtney and Grace were her friends too, since Taylor had joined the cross-country team the same time I did. But they were more my friends. I stayed when she had to quit because her nursing program became too demanding. Even though Taylor was from Kane, she didn't have a lot of friends. That was her choice. She could have had them. She was beautiful on the inside and out, with light brown hair, almost golden blonde in the sunlight, and the darkest almond-colored eyes. Logan was head over heels for her. But if she'd been a catty, gossipy kind of girl, he wouldn't have given her the time of day. I finished pouring my drink as Taylor went upstairs, then poked my head outside. Want to help me look for something cute and sexy, but also comfortable enough where I won't want to get rid of it when the booze hits me? I asked Heather. She was sitting, but now she was starting to look fuzzy to me. Too late. The booze had just knocked down my front door. She sighed, leaning back and crossing her legs at the ankles. Are they all talking about me? Not one word. I stepped out and sat down to rest next to her. Heather held up her drink, and I clinked mine against it. Salute. She raised hers up before taking a long drink. I'm already fucked up. I patted her leg. That's okay, I am too. Or I was getting there. Taylor's friend is going to drive us to the club. Do me a favor. She put her cigarette out, then locked those so-sad eyes on mine again. Anything. Don't let me go home with some random tonight, okay? Not a problem. Consider me your lesbian bitch tonight. She frowned. Pretty sure that'd make me your lesbian bitch. Really? I shrugged. Either way, you're mine tonight. No guy or girl better even look your way. She grinned. Are you going to be Butch Sam tonight? Oh yeah, I'm all... My mind was coming up blank. I gave up. I have no idea what the jokes are. We stood and moved to go inside, then headed to the basement. I'd put all the costumes from last year down there. If the others couldn't find anything, I'd tell them about the storage room. I was selfish. I wanted to get there first. You might not want to say that out loud around her. She looked at you this summer and said her favorite food was fish. I didn't think she meant the food. Chapter 4. Courtney was dressed as a sexy teacher. We were all giving her grief, since teaching was her major, but she shrugged us off. She said, Think of it as me practicing what not to wear. I have to be the buttoned-up, prim and proper version next year. I want to be inappropriate tonight. Grace was a colorful princess fish. I had no clue where she'd found the tool, but okay. I was impressed. The clothes looked like costumes bought from a store. Taylor lifted her hand in a Vanna White motion. She wore a black corseted dress with her hair pulled up into a tight bun. A piece of a wig was on the front of her face. She was a bearded lady. She clasped her hands together in front of her. I like roller coasters. I couldn't figure out how to be that, so this was the next best thing. Heather grunted. You're one hot bearded lady. Really? She perked up. Totally. Heather was leaning an elbow on my shoulder. Then all of the attention was focused on us. I elbowed her in the side. Oh yeah. She straightened, her arm falling back against her side. She was holding her drink in the same hand she used now to motion toward both of us. I figured we'd go opposite what we are in our real lives. I frowned. She hadn't said that when she'd suggested the costumes. She kept going. I'm an angel. She lifted the wings that we'd fastened behind her. They were made of white tulle, but I knew this tulle came from the costume closet. I might have to go on a mission to find the pink, sparkly tulle that Grace was wearing. I wondered if there was any left. I could do crafts with it, or ask someone who did crafts to make something pretty with it. Heather was saying, pointing to me, darkness here. Sam's all light and beautiful, so she's going the dark hooker route. I had on black fishnets, a black leather dress, and the same tulle as Heather's, but mine was black. We'd tried to cover it with black glitter we found in another container. The glue wasn't sticking, and half the glitter was on the floor. I made a mental note to clean when I got up tomorrow. The girls weren't sure how to react, and I held my hands out. I had no idea she intended us to be opposite what we are. I turned to Heather. Hearing that I'm all light is news to me. You met me in high school. You're happy now. She saluted me with her glass. Trust me, the costumes fit our opposites. She finished the rest of her Long Island iced tea. I raised an eyebrow, though I shouldn't have been surprised. Heather looked ready to bulldoze her way through a liquor store. She was still standing, we all were, but I was starting to waver. I glanced over and, yep, Taylor was holding onto the wall. Grace was holding onto Courtney, and Courtney was gritting her teeth, focusing on the spot behind me. It was time to dance. We needed to start sobering up. Just a little. Here we were. We walked into that nightclub like we owned it. The bouncers opened the door, and we strode right past them. The wind kicked up, and it was like a fan blowing for us, like we were walking on a runway. The angel, the dark hooker, the bearded lady, the sexy fish, and the teacher. All eyes were on us. And then Grace tripped and fell. Ooh! Oh my gosh! Courtney stopped to help her up. She tried. Her heel slipped, and she landed right next to Grace, her elbow decking her in the face. Ah! I wasn't even trying to help. No way. Tequila and my heels, not a good mix, I'd learned, thanks to Courtney. Heather and Taylor turned around. They were skilled at slinky Halloween costumes with heels. Both of them got the girls up, and no one flashed anybody. Are your friends okay? A guy materialized beside me, dressed as Batman. He was asking about them, but his eyes were roaming all over me. He licked his lips. Want a drink? Before I could reply, Heather was there. She positioned herself so her back was to him, and in one smooth move, edged him out so he wasn't even able to see me anymore. She remarked coolly over her shoulder, "Turn the heat down. This is Cade's woman." What? He craned his neck around, his eyes narrowing at me, and that's when I saw the fear creep in. Shit. He ran a hand over his head. You're Samantha Stratton. And as if the whole thing was a nightmare that wouldn't go away, he ignored Heather's body language and came right back into the circle. He stuck his hand out. I'm Steve. Man, that pass Mason caught tonight. He whistled in appreciation. It was fucking fantastic. My mouth was on the floor. I didn't think he could do it. All my buddies were like this. He pantomimed screaming and shook his arms in the air. Seriously, one of the best plays I've ever seen. That shit's going to be replayed on ESPN for weeks. Heather fixed him with a glare. Dude, really? What? He blinked a few times in confusion. You just hit on her. Now you're hitting on her man? He frowned. I'm not hit. He thought better of that, shaking his head. Whatever. You don't understand. It's football. I'm a man. Mason Cade is legendary. Mason Cade tends to go nuts when it comes to his woman. I tugged at the leather strap on my shoulder. That was kind of a sensitive topic. Last year we'd hit a rough bump. We got over it, but it still made me grimace to hear it. I coughed, linked my elbow with Heather's, and flashed the guy a smile. I'll pass on your comments to Mason. Thank you. I tugged my bodyguard with me. But we need drinks. His eyes lit up. I can get you drinks. And he was raising his hand, calling for a waitress. No. I tugged his arm down, still trying to be polite, but I could feel Heather bristling for a fight behind me. Thank you. Again, we're good. Independent women and all. We can get our own drinks. I began pushing Heather forward. The guy reached out behind me. Are you sure? I can give you my Twitter handle. Better yet. His voice rose as he yelled to be heard over the club's music. I'll tweet at Mason. I'll let him know I'm watching out for his girl, making sure no one messes with you tonight. Mason would hate that. My smile froze in place, but I waved one last time. Sounds good. Thank you. I'm sure he'll retweet you. I muttered under my breath, and then I'll want to block you in person. Taylor was waving from the bar. Courtney and Grace were beside her, huddled together like they were warding off a chill. I stepped around another group in costume and heard one of them say, Hey, isn't that Mason Cade's girlfriend? An excited buzz rose, and I cringed. Ignoring them, I pulled Heather with me into a small opening by Taylor and moved quickly to the bar's edge. Taylor had overheard. Do you want to leave? No, but... I glanced over my shoulder. That whole group was staring right at me. I looked past them and saw Steve talking with another group and pointing toward me. The tequila was starting to wane in my system. I let out a sigh. We probably should. Mason's celebrity status was always big. I was used to it in high school. He and Logan ran their school. But he became more famous when he started playing for Kane University, and even more so when he decided to finish his degree. Teams had been anxious to sign him, but no one knew how he'd actually play once he got into the NFL. That uncertainty disappeared after the first game he started. He'd run in 3 touchdowns, and had continued to dominate most games since. His status was ridiculous now. I tried to ignore it, keeping my head down and doing my thing. But some nights, like tonight, I couldn't ignore it. It wasn't that I didn't want to deal with it. It was just that he was my Mason, not theirs. The small modicum of privacy and normalcy we'd had before was gone now. "I'm on it." Taylor waved the bartender away when he brought over a bunch of drinks. "We're leaving." "No!" Courtney pulled out some cash and tossed it on the counter. "He already poured them. Let's drink these quick, then have Jason take us somewhere else." A new plan was hatched. We downed our drinks and left, and were waiting on the curb for Taylor's friend Jason to come back. He'd opted not to join us inside, but he was coming back. She checked her phone after 10 minutes, then sent off a text asking if he was close. A couple minutes passed without a response. She looked at me. He always responds. His phone is hooked up to his car. She texted him again. There'd been a line outside already, but after we came out, more and more people followed us. A few who wanted to smoke, then their friends, then their friends. I heard the conversations pick up and glanced over my shoulder. Yep, good old Steve was out there too, pretending to smoke. His eyes were on me, and when he saw me look, he lifted his hand in a wave. "Hey, you guys taking off?" A growl erupted from Heather. She rounded on him. "For fuck's sake, wait!" Too late. I reached for her, but she was already marching over to him. Everyone tensed. Heather was formidable, even when she was laid back and easy-breezy. She usually had a drawl ready, matched with a sultry and sexy grin. Nothing really ruffled her feathers. This Heather wasn't normal, and even I gulped to see her walk over to him. I felt like I'd gotten a glimpse of a black widow moving in for the kill. Courtney's hand touched my arm. I looked over. Her eyes were glued to Heather's back, and she gulped too. She was pale. Grace's hands were clasped in front of her, pulled up to her chest. Her eyes were wide. She bit down on her lip. I didn't look at Taylor. I already knew she was worried. "Hey!" Heather snapped at him. He had been watching me, but jerked his gaze to her. His spine straightened and his shoulders rolled back. His group of friends parted for her, and she strolled in, stopping right in front of him. Her hands found her hips, and she struck a defiant pose. "What's your problem?" Huh? You think she wants to deal with you?" He seemed to actually think about it. "You think she enjoys when meatheads like you hit on her, then find out who her boyfriend is, and turn into clingy stalker fans? And I heard that shit you said to her. You're going to tweet at her boyfriend and let him know you're watching out for her? Are you kidding me? Mason Cade might be a football god to you, but get a reality check. He's a lethal machine who turned his body into a weapon to bulldoze past running backs, linemen, and bigger assholes on the football field than you. Imagine facing him and telling him that you're watching the woman he loves, and really think how that might go over." As she talked, his eyes got bigger and bigger. His face was close to Heather's by the time she finished. He looked like a ghost. Heather wasn't done, though. "It's obvious that we're leaving, and here you are." She waved a hand around. "Coming out here, too, following her like that clingy stalker fan you became. Then you wave to her like you're friends? Fucking get over yourself." Taylor leaned close to me. "She's a female Logan." She readjusted her dress. "I think I'm a little turned on. Is that wrong?" I shook my head. "Share the story with Logan. He'll love it." Our ride pulled up in front of us. Jason leaned over from the driver's side to open the passenger door and shove it ajar. "Sorry, I wasn't expecting your text so soon. Too much fun, huh?" "Thank God," Taylor groaned and climbed in. Courtney opened the back door and started to climb into the back seat. Grace hurried around to the other side. I reached for the door, but looked over my shoulder. Heather was still in Steve-O's face, her cigarette lit and waving in the air. Jason looked over Taylor's seat to me.
Looks like you have a situation. Want me to play interference?
Did he have to use a football metaphor? But I nodded. Jason was quick-witted and snarky. He could diffuse the situation in half the time it would take me. And in a flash, he did. He wasn't a big guy. He was 5'10" and lean, and he was out his door and around the SUV in his pink polo, the collar turned out with gold on the inside, and white jeans that were molded to his skinny frame. Steve didn't even see him coming. Jason was there. He dipped down, put an arm through Heather's legs, tucked his shoulders against her back, and looped his other arm around her waist. He picked her up, throwing her over his shoulder, and winked at the guys.
Have a nice night, folks. Only drink and drive if you're the only one on the street.
He carried Heather to the vehicle and deposited her in the seat next to mine. The door was shut. He was in his driver's seat before Heather comprehended what happened. Then she started laughing. Taylor cracked a grin. Courtney and Grace dissolved into the same giggles they'd had at the house, and I met Jason's gaze in the rearview mirror as he started to pull away from the curb. Thanks for that. He grinned back.
No problem.
We were moving past the crowd. Everyone was happy, even Heather. And I started to relax. Then I looked to the right. Standing there, facing us, was someone dressed from head to toe in a black robe. The face was gone. A white mask stared back at me, one that reminded me of the movie Scream. There was no reason for my reaction, but my stomach dipped low. A sick shiver wound down my spine. That person was evil. I knew it. I could feel it, and I couldn't breathe for a moment. I also knew, without a doubt, that we'd see that person again. My blood went cold. Chapter 5. Jason took us to Pete's pub, where Taylor used to work. She'd put in a good word for Nate, and we'd visited him throughout the past year, enough to know the regulars on a first-name basis. When we walked in, I was already starting to relax. I knew I wasn't going in there as Mason Cade's girlfriend. I was Sam to them. Some of the staff and a few of the regulars waved to us, but I knew that when we took our booths in the corner, we'd be left alone. If we chose to be social, it was our decision. The bouncers would keep an extra eye out. They always did when Taylor was there anyways. The tequila, mixed with the Long Island iced tea, kept my body warm and floaty. The alcohol's effect had waned a little at the previous place, but my last drink was slamming into my body again. I was gone. I was in the clouds now. Dark hooker, airborne. The world looked all nice and cozy from my point of view. I smiled, knowing it was droopy and messy, but I didn't care. I leaned into Heather's shoulder. I love you, you know that? The corner of her mouth curved down. I went batshit at that guy. I don't know what's wrong with me. You have a man problem, Courtney yelled from the other side of our booth. Her hand lifted and plopped on the table. A bowl of peanuts upended and rolled over, falling into her lap. She had no clue. You're hurting and you're drunk, and that's never a good recipe. Heather grunted. Works just fine for me. No, I know. She held her hand out in front of her, but paused. I don't know what I was saying. Taylor grabbed one of the peanuts on the table, opened it, and popped the shelled nut in her mouth. She said around it, man problems, drinking. Yes, Courtney was off again. You should talk about what happened. That might help all of us understand. She gestured around the table. It'd be good therapy, too. We've all been there. She burped and continued blinking, giving Heather an expectant look. The love of my life dumped me because his sister was arrested. Courtney screwed her face up. The blank look came back. I've lost the ability to compute that. Your fiancé was arrested? Grace snorted. Her shoulders started shaking with soft laughter.
Taylor frowned at Courtney. Heather didn't react at all, merely drawling back. His sister was arrested, and he's not my fiancé. Got it. Courtney slapped her hand back down. You were arrested, and his sister took back the ring. Heather was reaching for a peanut, but paused. No. What are you talking about? Rings and fiancés and shit? No one's engaged here. Wait. Courtney's hand was back in the air. Your sister was arrested and he dumped you because of that? She frowned to herself, pulling her hand back to her lap. Oh man, is he in love with your sister? Unless my brother's had a sex change and his sexual orientation switched too, then that's not even possible. Courtney sucked in one of her cheeks, chewing on the inside of it. I think I'm drunk. Taylor spit out her drink, or the little sip she'd taken. It landed on the table. At least I thought it did. I was looking for it as she said, That's the first logical thing you've said since we got here. I was mesmerized by the glass in Taylor's hand, then saw we all had one in front of us. When had we gotten drinks here? I pointed at mine. Who ordered these? No. Heather propped her elbows on the table, leaning forward. My problem is that my ex is amazing at fucking. Grace hiccuped. Is that actually a problem? Heather kept going. He's got a body like fucking Brad Pitt in Fight Club, and a face that could be a model's. I mean, he's gorgeous. He's beyond gorgeous, and he's a stand-up guy. The problem is that he's too stand-up. He's a bad boy, and he can be a dick. So he's not boring or anything, but he's raising his sister, and she's not making his life easy right now. She got arrested for some really bad shit, and he thinks he needs to devote more time to her. She hiccuped too, jerking back in her seat. Then she went on as if no hiccup had happened. And that's my problem. He broke up with me, and the reason makes me want him even more. It makes you love him more? Heather shook her head at Taylor. No, my love meter is all the way over. It can't go any further, but damn, I want to fuck him, like right now. She let out a sigh. No, really. I pointed at my drink. Who ordered these? Courtney bobbed her head up and down. That is a problem. Wow, I wish I could find a guy like that. All you bitches. Her finger waved at us again. Got all of them. I hate you guys sometimes. Grace melted into the wall. Her eyes were closing and drool fell from her mouth. I crossed my arms over my chest and leaned all the way back in my seat. I'm not drinking this until I know where they came from. Taylor grabbed my drink and took a sip, then put it back as she spoke to Heather. You should call him, right now. She waved a hand at the glass, saying to me, It's fine, I'm not dead. Nope. I was waiting a full 5 minutes. She could die. People ended up roofied like this. I can't call him. I'm drunk as fuck right now. No. Courtney's hand was once again in the air. This is the best time to call. You'll be honest now, and he can say things to you that maybe he normally wouldn't if you were sober. You know, the walls aren't up now. I couldn't handle it anymore. I smacked Courtney's hand down. Stop it. That's making me paranoid. Taylor choked on her drink again. I held my breath. I was right. We were drugged. Were the drugs already kicking in? She sputtered out, her head going back and forth. Courtney's not making you paranoid. The tequila is. Tequila usually makes me want to get naked, Grace announced to us. We all paused. Our heads swiveled to her, and then she let out a deep yawn and rested back against the wall. Heather gestured to her. She's out for the night. She picked up her drink and motioned to me. I don't think we're going to party like rock stars tonight. I shrugged. As long as you're okay, I don't care. Aww. Courtney stuck out her bottom lip. You guys are so sweet together. I remember when I first met you, Heather. You scared the shit out of me. Yeah. Taylor was nodding. You and I didn't hit it off either. Heather lifted up a shoulder. That's how I am. You either like me right away or you don't. You get what you see with me. I scowled. For some reason, Courtney's last statement pissed me off.
I wasn't sure why. Taylor inclined her head to me. What about you, Sam? How'd you react to Heather when you first met her? I tried to remember. A drunken fog was hindering my memories. Heather chuckled, low and smooth. She looked at me like I was her first drop of water she'd seen in the desert. I was the answer to your prayers. Admit it, Stratton. You had a lady boner for me when you stopped at Manny's all those years ago. Had I? Then I laughed. I'd been running to avoid my mom while Mason and Logan were out somewhere. I nodded. You're right. I think you saved me in some ways. No, I didn't. Her shoulder nudged mine. I gave you a job, that's all. You gave me friendship. I had Mason. I had Logan. I had no female friends. I needed that. A moment of silence hung over the table, and Heather turned to look at me. We'd talked about that time of my life, but I didn't think I'd ever said it as bluntly as I just had. Tears came to Heather's eyes, and all the drunken anger, whatever was there, faded. She blinked back those tears. "Aw, Sam." She hugged me to her, burying her head in my shoulder and neck. I felt the wetness against my skin. I think it was mutual. I needed someone too. Taylor was blinking back her own tears. You both scared me when I met you. I mean... Her hand reached for another peanut, and she gestured to me. You're Sam. Logan loves you, like loves you, in the he'd step in front of a bus for you way. And it's not just him. Holy shit, the first time I saw Mason, when he looked at you and he didn't think anyone else was watching... She closed her eyes and shivered. It gave me all the tingles all over. It's the stuff that books are written for. It's till the end of days kind of shit. You and Logan have that. Oh, I know. A proud smile tugged at her lips. But the first time I met you, you were big in my head. You were legendary stuff until that summer when we started to really get to know each other. And you too. She indicated Heather, lifting her glass for a drink. I was jealous of you. I knew you and Logan had a special friendship, and I was threatened just a bit. I'm not anymore, but yeah. And now I love both of you so much. A tear slipped down her cheek. Good friends are great to have, that's for damn sure. Courtney sniffed. Her entire face was covered in tears, and her eyeliner was smudged. Black streaks had formed under her eyes. I can't. She waved at us. I can't even. This is the best night of my life. Grace let out a snore. Chapter 6. We drank, we danced, we laughed. Grace slept. As far as Halloween Eve nights went, it was one of the best I'd had so far. I was going to be a dark hooker every year from now on. It was the end of the night, and we were waiting for a ride again. Jason had joined us for a few drinks, then left for a party, and Taylor said that meant he was out for the count. Taylor offered a driver, and I had suspicions of who that driver would be. But I didn't care anymore. Heather had laughed for most of the night. My job was done. She could experience heartache later. For now, she was good. You ladies have a ride coming. One of the bouncers came over, knocking on our table. They were letting us wait inside, instead of kicking us out to wait on the curb like everyone else. I was glad, because Grace was still snoring. My eyelids were drooping too, and if that ride didn't come soon, I'd have to be carried out. Tay-Tay said we did, Heather said, sounding tired. He chuckled, asking, Your man? I didn't hear an answer, so I assumed it was a nod. I tried to open my eyes. Is girls' night officially over? I think so, yeah. Okay. Heather said so, and so it was good. I went back to sleeping. A hand shook me awake. Sam. I felt sluggish. My body felt weighed down, even my eyes. I didn't want to look at whoever it was. Hey, our ride is here. We have to go. No.
I snuggled closer to Mason's hard chest. It felt more rigid than normal. I'm good here. A man laughed in a soothing voice. I'll carry her. It's no problem. You sure? Oh yeah, she's family. It's no problem. Wait, that didn't make sense. I tried lifting my head. My neck screamed in pain. It was stiff, but I looked. Yes, that was Logan. I recognized the voice, but who was he talking to? He was bending down over my side of the booth. No one else was there, but that voice. Who was that? I looked as Logan pulled me over and scooped an arm under me. Hey! I frowned, but looped an arm around his shoulders. He lifted me up, cradling me against his chest. I tried to look. Who was that? Who? That person you were talking to. The bar was empty. All the chairs were turned over on the tables. The only light on was by the door, and a staff member was holding it open for us. But Logan had been talking to someone. The staff person was too far away for it to be them. I wasn't talking to anyone, Sam. No, he had been. I knew he had been. You're drunk and tired, and by the time we get home, I'm pretty sure Mason will be there. Mason. A thrill went through me. I started to wake up a little bit more, and as he went through the door, he had to turn sideways. I looked over to where I'd been sitting, and there. I saw the swish of a black robe. Someone was there. I started to sit up, but Logan protested. His hand came to my head. No, don't sit up. You'll crack your head. Over there! I craned my neck to see, but we were through the door. I couldn't see anyone, but there had been someone. Why didn't Logan remember talking to him? That didn't make sense. I yawned, unable to fight it, and my eyelids kept drooping. Logan deposited me next to Heather, who was already curled into a ball on the seat. Taylor tried to give me a smile from the front, but she was too tired to. She closed her eyes, and I could already hear Courtney and Grace snoring in the back. Logan! I stopped him as he was stepping back, reaching to close my door. What? You were talking to someone in there. Who? He shook his head again, a slight frown marring his face. I wasn't, Sam. I thanked the staff guy for holding the door for me, but that was it. There was no one else. But there had been. A black robe, or something black. A chilling image of the black robe and white mask from the first nightclub flashed in my head. No, I wouldn't let myself imagine it was him. That made even less sense. Mason's coming tonight? He nodded. He doesn't have that meeting tomorrow in LA that he thought he had. Mason. He was coming home. He'd be there, or would be soon after we got there. The black robe had nothing on Mason. I fell back asleep, dreaming of my soulmate. It was his hands that woke me, that picked me up from the SUV. I recognized those hands. I'd recognize them if I was dead to the world. But I opened my eyes and gave him the biggest, stupidest smile of the whole night, and there'd been a bunch to compete against. Hey! There he was, looking back down at me. I reached up to touch him, and he caught my fingers in his mouth. He grinned, his tongue sweeping out to lick them before he released me. Hey, yourself. I tucked my head further against his chest, content to gaze up at him. I got really drunk tonight. Sounds like you had a good night. I heard you had a good night, too. Not as good as your night. He went in the house, then down the hallway to our room. I felt like I was still dreaming. I was in a haze, and slowly he lowered me to the bed. He helped me get under the covers. I could get undressed. He shook his head. Trust me, I'll be doing that in a moment. He stripped off his shirt, his muscles shifting and bulging as he tossed it to the side, and came to bed only in his sweatpants. They dipped low on his hips, right underneath the V from his muscles, and I was already itching to push them the rest of the way off. The bed dipped under his weight, and I rolled onto my back. Grinning, I looped my hands around his head, and he knelt over me.
I was cursing the bed covers between us and the rest of the space between my body and his. I ran my hands down his arms, feeling how strong they were. "I love you." He smiled back down at me, his eyes darkening, softening. "I love you too." It had been 3 weeks since I'd seen him last. 3 weeks since I'd had enough time in my running schedule to fly out and see him. 3 weeks since I'd touched him, tasted him, felt his body next to mine. I kicked at the covers, pulling them down. Then I was right there, in my dark hooker getup. My breasts were straining against my dress. I knew my nipples were hard. The throbbing was there, and it was building as his eyes roamed up and down, lingering on my breasts. He murmured, "A witch?" "A hooker. I was the darkness to Heather's light." He chuckled and bent down, and I closed my eyes. I felt his lips on my neck, and oh dear God, he could suckle like no one else. I squirmed, wanting those lips farther down. I wanted them on my breasts, on my stomach, between me and then in me. But I wanted them on my lips too, and I let out a soft breath as he moved up, grazing my neck, my jaw, and then lingering just above my lips. "You're killing me," I was panting. "Maybe that's the intent." I opened my eyes. That didn't sound like Mason. And then it wasn't. The white mask was hovering over me. The man in the black robe was there, and he had a knife in his hands. I screamed and kicked out. "Sam! Sam!" I tried to kick free and get off the bed, but he slammed me back down. "Sam, stop!" Wait, that voice. My head whipped back to his, and my body sagged in relief. It was Mason. "Oh, thank God," I sobbed, wrapping my arms around his neck. He rested on me, letting his full weight down gently, and then shifted to the side. He pulled me back against him, and he held me. A hand smoothed down my hair. "What's wrong? What just happened there?" I shook my head. I tasted the salt from my tears. "I've been seeing this guy. He's in a black robe and he's wearing a mask. He's evil, Mason." I trembled. "Evil? I don't know what's going on with me." His hand shook as he asked, "Did someone drug you?" I didn't know. I tipped my head back, looking at him. "If they did, it would have been that first drink at the club. That was when I saw him first." He ran another hand down my hair, tucking some stray strands behind my ear. His thumb brushed over my cheek lovingly. "You should get checked out. Do you want to go to the hospital?" "No." I clasped my arms around him, hugging him. "I want to stay here with you. I'm sure it'll leave my system by tomorrow." "You sure? What about the others? Were they drugged too?" No one had said anything about a robed guy. They'd all acted normal, just drunk. "I'm sure it's nothing." "Sam." Concern weighed heavy in his eyes. I shook my head again. "No, I'm really okay. Or I will be." I pushed myself up, covering his lips with mine. I tugged him back down until he was lying halfway on top of me again. "This is what I need. This is all that I need." His body shook again, but one of his hands ran down my side and then pushed up under my shirt. It rested over my ribs, his thumb grazing the underside of my breast. He lifted his head. "You sure?" "Yes." I gave him a look, then hooked my leg around his. I pulled him down at the same time I pushed up against him. We both moaned from the contact. He was right there. I could feel how hard he was, and he was aching to be inside me just as much as I wanted him. "I just want you. Only you." I ran my hand down the side of his face, my finger caressing the side of his mouth, and then I kissed him. My lips covered his, and I felt him surrender. He'd come home, and we fit together again, just like always. Before long, he was sliding inside of me, and I gasped, arching my back.
This was how it always was supposed to be. Then he paused, pulled out, and began to thrust back in again. I locked my legs around him and moved my hips with his. Chapter 7. Everyone was hungover the next morning. I woke around 9, washed up a little, pulled on pajama pants and a sweatshirt, then trudged out to the kitchen. Mason wasn't far behind, wearing just his sweatpants that dipped deliciously low on his hips. I made coffee as he started up the stove. Bread was in the toaster when Taylor and Logan joined. They took their coffee with smiles of thanks, then sat behind the kitchen table. They moved to the farthest seats. When the toast was ready, Mason put it on a plate and added it to the table. Butter, knives, and a handful of empty plates went next. Without a word spoken, Logan started buttering the toast. He passed the finished pieces to Taylor, and by that time Courtney and Grace had joined us. They paused, their eyes wide and lingering on Mason, before gulping and averting their gaze. They sat, and Taylor gave them the first pieces of toast. I gave them coffee too, then started another pot. Mason began making bacon and eggs. I couldn't move away from him, not even if I tried to force myself. After fidgeting while the coffee was brewing, I ended up leaning against the counter and resting my head against his upper arm. It bulged under my touch. My hand rubbed down his back, ending and curling in on his sweatpants. It was my anchor, and I loved the feel of it. Mason dropped a soft kiss on the top of my head, then went back to cooking. When the eggs and bacon were done, he placed them on a plate, and they went onto the table along with everything else. He came back and continued cooking, and I resumed resting my head against his upper arm. Courtney and Grace took their turn. They scooped up the food and plated it, passing the plates back to Logan and Taylor, who were nibbling on their own pieces of toast now. Heather shuffled in, yawning big, and she waved a hand to everyone. One of her eyes was still closed. She passed me by, going to sit next to Taylor. I held out a cup of coffee. She took it on the way there, not pausing a second, and took her seat. Courtney put a piece of bacon on a plate. Grace stopped eating hers and put an egg on the plate. Logan added 2 pieces of toast, and Taylor slid the plate right in front of Heather. She smiled, her eyes sweeping over everyone in the room. Nate was the last. He paused in the doorway, a hand rubbing at his stomach, and he grinned at everyone. He frowned at Mason, noting his shirtless state, and shook his head. Logan snorted from the table, but that was the only response. Nate came over to hug me, then dropped down in the closest seat to Logan. Mason added more food to the table. I finished the last pot of coffee, pouring 2 new mugs for Mason and myself. Logan, smirking, pulled off his shirt and tossed it across to Mason. It was caught, and it was pulled on, and now the shirtless one was Logan. Nate stopped, his eyes skirting between the brothers, and shrugged. He pulled his own shirt off, winking at Courtney, before hunching back over his plate. When Mason and I sat, our food was already waiting for us. Everyone ate, and 30 minutes passed. Not one word was spoken. I held Mason's hand under the table the entire time. Best breakfast ever. 2 hours later. I was sitting on the curb, a pumpkin on the street between my feet, a large carving knife in my right hand. Heather was next to me, holding the same thing. I brought my knife down, embedding it deep into the gourd, and I cut away the stem. Yanking it up, I cleaned off the first of the pumpkin's guts. Heather grunted, her hand covered in pumpkin goo. Why did we get stuck doing the damned pumpkins? I went back to hacking at the thing. Courtney and Grace went to their apartment, and the guys are going to finish decorating that haunted house for tonight. I don't know where Taylor is. A second thrust, and I had the first eye out. I paused. Should I hollow it out first, then cut the face? Heather stopped, half her pumpkin's insides on the street between us. She considered it, then shrugged. Makes sense, but is there a wrong way to gut a pumpkin? If we gut ourselves first. Touché. She pointed her carving knife at me. Got any homicidal tendencies I should know about? I grinned. I was a dark hooker last night. You were the angel of darkness, different thing. You're right. That would have meant homicidal tendencies. I set down the knife and plunged my hand in. No tendencies that I can think of, although... I paused. What? I think someone slipped something into my drink at the nightclub. What? She sat up. Did you tell Mason? I nodded. Yeah, but I was fine. I downplayed it a bit. Oh. She frowned. Did you have any side effects from it? I was hallucinating. Kept thinking I saw some guy in a black robe and mask. Mask? Like a Scream type of mask? Kinda. The face wasn't pronounced. There were no eyes, nose, or mouth. It was just white. That's freaky as fuck. I nodded. Not arguing with that. I scooped out another handful of seeds and guts. Am I weird and feeling like this is cathartic? She snorted. Her hand went back in and came out, covered in the same orange insides. I'm imagining this is Channing. She paused again. Maybe I'm the one with the homicidal tendencies. I grinned. You do seem to be enjoying that. She shrugged, her hand plunging back inside. We stopped talking after that. The pumpkins were cleaned out. We set them aside to start on 2 more pumpkins. Once they were all done, we hosed down the street and carried them inside. We were close to finishing the faces for 2 of the pumpkins when a stampede of feet came up from the basement. The guys popped out, arms full of costumes. What are you doing? I asked. Logan asked at the same time, his eyes on the pumpkins. What are you doing? Heather pointed at the one in front of her. This is self-explanatory. She waved the knife at them. Your turn. Oh. Logan looked down at the costumes in his hands. He said to me, We gotta take a bunch of these at the haunted house. We left most of the girly ones for you guys. Are you 2 doing the same costumes as last night? Heather and I shared a look. We hadn't discussed it. Heather shrugged, going back to cutting out a tooth. We'll figure it out. Logan paused, watching me. This is okay, right? I didn't know why it wouldn't be. Yeah, we'll figure something out with whatever we have here. It's no problem. Okay. He started outside, leaving the door open. Nate flicked 2 fingers up in a salute, ducking out behind him. Mason was last, and he came over to me first. Hey. He dropped a light kiss to my lips. I'll see you later tonight. He glanced to Heather before kissing me again. You'll be okay? Heather let out a sigh, put her knife down, and muttered, I need a cigarette. Was that me? Mason asked when she was gone. Channing broke up with her. He lifted his head up 2 inches. Are you serious? And he's coming tonight to see you. Fuck. He looked to where Heather had slipped out the back door. Her back was leaning against the patio doors, the cigarette already lit. That's harsh. Hence why we were so drunk last night. His eyes darkened. Remember our own rough patch? I'd gotten drunk a couple of those nights, but I knew he'd gone on a bigger binge than me. I felt him starting to pull away and caught the front of his shirt. I love you. His eyebrows dipped together. I love you. His lips tried to show me too. When we were done, a few heavy breathing seconds later, he cursed under his breath. What are the chances we can send Heather in my place? I grinned against his lips. So she can decorate with Logan? He nodded, grinning right back. The 2 will yell at each other the whole time. Pretty much. I frowned and looked around him. Where's Taylor? Did she leave after breakfast? Mason shrugged. I don't know. Logan never said anything. I assumed she was with you. I shook my head, my stomach twisting. I stepped back, but my clean hand was still on his chest. It felt right leaving it there, like he was anchoring me. I glanced around again, but I knew she wouldn't have magically appeared in the last few seconds. "I'll call her." I nodded at the pumpkins. "We're going to set these out with tea lights before we leave tonight." He rubbed his hand up and down my arm. "What are you guys doing today? We'll be at the house the whole time. Logan's gone all out with this party." I shrugged. We did have all day. I didn't have classes on Fridays, and Heather was up for the whole weekend. We weren't the type to do the salon. Saloon, yes. Salon, no. "I don't know. We'll figure something out." I pressed myself up, bringing my lips fully against his again. Logan would be yelling any second. "Have fun. I'll see you tonight." I could almost count it down. 3, 2, and on 1, I pointed to the door at the exact instant Logan shouted. Mason laughed and pressed one last kiss to my forehead. "Okay. Love you. Be safe. Have fun. And if you start drinking early, call. I'll be sober. I'll come and pick you up." I flashed him a grin. "Bye. And all of that to you too, except the last part." He laughed, going out the door, and right as it closed, I yelled, "I won't be sober tonight." "Looking forward to it," he yelled back, his words muffled through the wood. I knocked on the patio glass and Heather turned. She nodded, pulling her cigarette out. "Your perfect soulmate left?" There was no bite to her words, but I frowned. "You and Channing will be fine. You know that, right? Your breakups are never permanent." She picked up her knife again, pulling the last pumpkin in front of her. The knife was raised and poised, and she said, "I don't know about this time." And she brought it down with a vehemence she hadn't had earlier. I went back to cutting mine, but looked over my shoulder one last time. Where'd Taylor go? Chapter 8. All right. Heather stepped out from the bathroom. We'd gone slutty last night, so we were going funny tonight. Bypassing whatever costumes were left downstairs, we spent the afternoon downtown. What we went home with had us both in stitches. I was holding back my laughter again. I clamped my mouth closed and nodded. "Mm-hmm." She was dressed in a white onesie, the opening around her face lined with pink hair. She reached up to grab a sparkling pastel-colored rainbow horn. Heather's face was dead serious. "Is my horn in the right spot?" Another laugh bubbled up. I stifled it, swallowing it back down. "Looks good." She lifted up her hand and motioned in a circle. "Okay, turn around. I'll check your ass." Her voice hitched. I bit down on my lip. No laughing, not yet. I turned. I was dressed in the same white onesie. There was an opening for my face, but it was only lined with white cloth. My hands were normal. They weren't supposed to have attention focused on them. And my feet ended in 2 large black hooves. Heather's arms had the matching 2 front hooves, but the back of my costume was where the action was. A long white tail extended from my costume, pink hair at the tip, and underneath the tail was another small hole. A contraption hung from it on the inside, with a cord running from it down my arm, to a button resting on the inside of my palm. We turned to face the correct way. Heather was in front of me, I was behind her. She was the head, I was the ass. She said, "Ready?" My finger moved to the button. In the same monotone, I replied, "Ready." "Push it." She had a similar contraption on her costume, and we pushed our buttons together. A loud, horsey neigh came from a small speaker attached near her face, nestled in her pink mane, and at the same time the tail on my costume lifted and a burst of glitter exploded in the air. We were a glitter-farting unicorn. Together. I dissolved in laughter. Heather was right next to me. We both ended up on the floor, like we'd been all afternoon once we found the costume. She sat up and panted, "Best damn costume ever!" I nodded. I couldn't talk. I was still laughing. Okay. She tried to stop laughing. Her laughter was coming out as half hiccups now. She grabbed for my arm. Let's get up. 1 drink, then we go. I glanced at the clock. We'd spent half the afternoon putting the costume together while answering the door for trick-or-treaters, but it was long past time for any more. The costume was done, and the party had started a couple of hours ago. It was time to go. Yeah, I'll call Mason to pick us up. Heather pumped her fist in the air. Score! That means another 2 drinks. My stomach rolled over. The hangover was still with me, but this was Halloween and Heather time. I was down for anything. She mixed 2 Long Island iced teas for us, and I tucked my phone away after Mason replied. He's leaving now. She held one up for me. I took it, and she saluted me with hers. To friendship. Her eyes met mine. A look passed between us, and I felt myself choking up. Then I pushed my button, and glitter exploded in the air. My lip twitched, and I raised my glass up. Best friendship ever. After swallowing, she rested her glass on the counter. For real, though. Thanks for this weekend. I needed it. You're probably going to get back together with Channing tonight. She shook her head, her eyes downcast. No. Sex, maybe. Getting back together? No. She closed her eyes a moment. Breaking up sucked, even if it was the right thing to do. I'd been there. It hadn't been long for Mason and me, but I remembered that time. I'd felt like I was dying, literally. Heather had picked me up off the floor. I didn't think I was doing the same for her now, but I was trying. One day at a time. You might not have faith, but I do. I know this breakup isn't permanent. He's going to be begging you to come back in no time. Nothing else made sense. Heather and Channing loved each other. They were almost as inseparable as Mason and I, and more so in some ways. They'd been best friends since 3rd grade, and the relationship had never waned after she'd transferred to Fallen Crest in junior high. Here's hoping, but God, she groaned. He's already there. He texted me an hour ago. I patted her hand. Let me know when you need to bail tonight, if you do. We could do a code word. You just say llama, and I'll know what you're talking about. We'll leave. I'm your side chick tonight. She snorted on her drink, spitting some of it out. Mason pulled up into the driveway 5 minutes later, and we headed out. He only shook his head at our costume, but I saw a faint grin there. He was amused, I could tell. I was pulling the door shut behind me when Heather frowned over her shoulder. Did you ever call Taylor? Weren't you wondering where she was before? Oh. I'd forgotten. Yeah. Heather climbed into the back seat of Mason's Escalade. I remained on the doorstep, pulling my phone out and dialing Taylor's phone. I reached for the door handle again. I was going to close it when I heard a ringing from upstairs. I stopped, pulling the phone from my ear. Ring, ring. It stopped. I rang her number again and held my breath, listening. It was ringing on my end, but I didn't hear anything from inside this time. I stepped back into the living room. Taylor? Are you up there? Stratton, Heather hollered from the vehicle. My buzz is fading. I pressed my lips together. I thought I had heard her phone, but that didn't make sense. If she was here, she'd be in Logan's loft on the 3rd floor. I wouldn't be able to hear her phone all the way up there. No, I was just hearing things. That's all it was. I texted her. Where are you? Call me. Then I put the phone in my pocket and locked the door behind me. Chapter 9. The house was insane. People were lined up out on the front sidewalk waiting to get in. There were tombstones on the lawn, with mechanical ghosts popping up from behind and screaming before going back down. As we pulled up, some girls who had just joined the line screamed and fell down after the first ghost.
If I hadn't been buzzed, I would have too. Heather scrambled out. "That's awesome." I raised my eyebrows at Mason as I climbed out. He was dropping us off, then parking somewhere else, and knowing Mason, he'd be jumping over some backyard fences in a shortcut to the party. He shrugged. "Don't act like you don't know him. He's your brother too." "He was yours first." I shut the door and saw Heather's raised eyebrows. "What?" I moved around her. "Yes, I went there." "Not your best retort." She started beside me. A few people grumbled when they realized we were cutting, but my glare shut them up. No way was I waiting in line for Logan's party. The 3 guys who were trying to keep some order started to hold up their hands to stop us. "Really?" I clipped out, and we were shown inside. They opened the doors and stepped aside. The inside was just as impressive. It was dark inside, with a single lit-up path leading down a hallway. The first room was covered in goo. I tried telling myself it was probably just pudding, but it felt disgusting. We went down the path and hands shot out from somewhere to grab our ankles. I screamed, then kicked out. A muffled curse came next, but I wasn't grabbed again. That didn't last long. We had to go past another set of rooms. I heard screaming, so I was already ahead of time. But when we got there was no preparing. The lights on the path turned off, and we had to stand still. I grabbed onto Heather, and she held me back. Neither of us spoke. We both knew we had to just endure this. Then suddenly a light flashed, and a body hurled toward us. "Ah!" I screamed. I couldn't hold this one in either, and I jumped on top of Heather. "Ugh!" She caught me, but looked up. "Are you serious?" "Carry me! Be my Mason!" "Fuck that." She tossed me off. "You got legs, use them." What she was saying made sense, but my knees weren't accepting it. They were knocking together, and I was about to drop to the floor. I grabbed onto her, holding myself upright. "I'm going to kill Logan." "Me too." But she held on to me and we moved forward, like 2 grannies looking for their dropped dentures somewhere. The third room wasn't bad. We walked on crushed eggshells. Not a lovely feel, and they didn't sound the best either. The 4th section was a hallway. This one had zombies, and yes, they chased us. I punched one. I wasn't discriminating. Anything that came at us was getting hit. I'd never signed a disclaimer. "I'm suddenly realizing why your knight in shining armor didn't come with us," Heather cursed. Her hand clenched around my costume. "That fucker bypassed this for the real party." We could hear bass music somewhere. I was assuming the basement, but we had to get there. I sighed. Why didn't I think of wearing our night vision goggles to this thing? Heather stopped. I ran into her. As I bounced back, she whirled on me. "You have night vision goggles?" "Logan's." And yep, I was cursing myself again. He probably had them with him. He was probably wearing them. He was probably right behind us. Acting on a theory, I punched the air behind me. Nothing. "What are you doing?" I turned back, lifting my shoulder up. "Had a hunch. Didn't pan out." She grunted, and we were told by a loud, booming voice, "Proceed, underlings!" I jumped again, flicking my middle finger up. "Fuck you!" Heather snorted in laughter, but we edged forward again, practically wrapped around each other. She laughed, muffling it by pressing her mouth into my shoulder. "We're really embodying our costume. 2 ends of a horse's ass." "Shut up!" But I was laughing. "And it's a farting unicorn costume. Is there really a difference? Pastel colors and glitter? We could glitter these assholes later." "I'm down for that." She raised her voice as we bypassed one more room, and someone lunged for us with a bloodied chainsaw. "We're going to fart glitter on you. Back off, chainsaw asshole." The guy did, holding his hands up. The chainsaw was attached to him by a strap. "Hey, just doing what I was told." "We're friends of Logan's. We want the shortcut to the basement." He grinned, his face a grotesque green and bloody red. "Like we haven't heard that before." "Hey!"
I was in his face, shaking my finger. Heather was right behind me. I'm Logan's stepsister. I wasn't above dropping names in the situation. I fuck Mason Cade. Heather's head popped out. And I have a weird sisterly friendship with Logan. She paused. I don't fuck Mason Cade. I don't even really talk to him, full disclosure. He held his hands up. It's hard to recognize you with the whole... He gestured to our costume. My black hair was covered by the white costume. You know, where's the basement? He pointed further down. You're almost there. When the line cuts right, go left. There's a back door to the basement there. Traitor! Someone called from behind us. Heather glanced back. You want us to fart glitter on you too? We'll come back and find you. It will happen, trust me. The voice came back. If the door sticks, just pull a little harder. A second person said, What a wuss, it's fucking glitter, seriously? The first one retorted, That shit doesn't shower off you. You'll be wearing it for 2 weeks. Real turn on when you're trying to get your dick sucked later. Heather yelled back, Okay, thank you. We don't need to hear about your future date aspirations. Her hand tightened on my arm. Let's go. The line went right. We did as instructed, finding a doorknob, and when the door swung open to reveal pure darkness, I said, Hold on. I felt the wall around us until I felt a light switch and flicked the light on. Voila. Stairs appeared before us. We hurried in, shutting the door, but we left the light on. I was guessing we'd been told the back way into the basement party. There should have been more lighting. This place is freaky as fuck. I nodded. Good on Logan's part, huh? We got to the end. I was looking for another way out, but there was nothing. We'd stepped into a cement room. I couldn't even see bookshelves or under a wall or anything. It was 3 cement walls around us, and I looked behind the stairs. Nothing there. Chills went down my spine. Heather? That asshole set us up. I started to push her back to the stairs. We should go upstairs. The light went out, plunging us into darkness. Ah! Ah! We both started screaming, and we didn't stop. What the fuck do we do? I sagged against the wall. I didn't know, but I stopped screaming. My voice was already starting to hurt. Phones! We have phones! You're right. I could hear the relief in her voice and felt her reaching for her pocket. Then she froze. Fuck! Fuck? I was feeling for mine too. Nothing. Both of my pockets. I didn't have pockets. Neither of us had pockets. We gave them to Mason in the car. I hadn't wanted to run the risk of losing mine, so I'd handed it over. Heather had followed suit. I finished her train of thought. Because our costume doesn't have pockets. We both paused, then said together, Shit! Okay, fine. We could improvise. I began feeling the wall. We need to go back up. Just follow this back to the stairs and we'll go... Something clicked. It wasn't the lock, but it sounded like it was. And it sounded like it came from the top of the stairs. I wasn't going to let myself think that way. No one would lock us in. Heather's voice hitched up. What was that? My mind was scrambling in the same rhythm as my heartbeat. It wanted to pound its way out of my chest. I had no idea. It most definitely was the door upstairs. The chainsaw asshole had done this. He was probably following orders, just like he said. Logan might have said, Hey, if 2 chicks try to cut the line, send them to the other basement. Then that guy might have been like, Sure, no problem. And he had. He'd lied to us instead of helping us. I'd make Mason hold him down so I could stick our glitter up his real asshole. And none of these thoughts were making me feel better. I felt ready to puke, if anything. Heather was shaking behind me. I grunted. Aren't you always the tough one in our duo? You're the unicorn's brains. Give me a bar brawl and I'm there. Give me locked up in a dingy serial killer basement? Fuck no, it's all you. This is your expertise. You grew up with the psychopath." She patted my arm. "Get to it, prodigal psychopath. Lead us out of here." Fear put edges in her tone. She whimpered, "Please." I groaned. She wasn't helping me. "I'm not a prodigal psychopath. My mom was a psychopath, I'll give you that." I started edging forward. The steps would appear again. "But I'm not a prodigal anything. If anything, I'm a running prodigy." She snorted. "Or a prodigy at screwing Mason Cade." Her voice went up a notch. She mimicked me. "I fuck Mason Cade." I laughed with her, some of the tension easing now. "Shut up." I edged further ahead, using my hand to feel the wall. We came to the end, and I felt the bottom of it with my foot. When I felt the stairs, I sighed in relief. It was supposed to strike terror in that guy. Yeah, didn't happen. "Here." I took her hand and guided her around me, showing her where the handrail for the stairs was. "Feel that? Just hold it tight, and we can go back up the stairs." What if that sound was him locking us in? Then I was hoping that wasn't the case. "We'll break that bitch down." She groaned, falling in line behind me as we started up the stairs. Why don't I have a good feeling about this? My hand held on tighter to the railing, and I muttered under my breath, "Welcome to my life." But we were going up, and we were getting out of here, whether or not that door opened. I was ready to raise holy hell. Chapter 10. The door was locked. That pissed me off. Even as I reached for it, tried to turn it, and it didn't budge. I wasn't scared. I was livid. Is that locked?" I ignored Heather and pounded on the door. "Let us the fuck out!" "1 second. Now!" When the door didn't immediately open, I didn't wait. Holy hell, here I come. I was about to raise some. I started banging on the door nonstop. There were no pauses between my fists and my yells. There were no windows down there, or doors, or secret walls. We were locked in a coffin. Okay, it might have been a pantry, but it was a coffin to me. "Let us the fuck out, right now! I'm not going to stop!" I banged the hell out of that door. I didn't stop until I heard a sob from behind me. "Heather? I am scared shitless right now." That was enough. My rage and terror switched to resourcefulness. This was a door. Doors weren't cemented in, unlike the walls below. They had to be added, and I felt along the end of it, finding the frame. That meant they had to be screwed in. No, I had to pull the pins out of the hinges. "Okay, Heather." I was going to get this door off, even if my fingers got all cut up and busted. I needed my feet to run, not my hands. "Do me a favor, okay? I'm not leaving you. I know, but I'm going to undo these screws, so I might need your help." I waited. Another pause. Then, "What do you need me to do?" "Hold me up so that I don't fall. Just brace yourself on a step and dig in. If I start falling, hold onto the rail with everything you've got." That doesn't sound like a good plan. I know, but I'm improvising here. I'm going to murder Logan when we get out of here. That's good. Murder. Keep envisioning that. I'm going to take that carving knife we used on those pumpkins, and I'm going to... She kept going, but I tuned her out. I had to focus on the hinge pins, and they were in there tight. I cringed, already feeling my skin tear, but I didn't cry out. That'd alarm Heather. I couldn't have her scared any more than she was. That wasn't going to help, so I kept going. The pain was ignored. I felt warm wetness dripping down my hands and knew it was blood. I could smell it, but I hoped Heather didn't. When I got one undone, the door sagged just a tiny bit. It gave me more momentum, and I had to stretch for the second hinge pin. The last was in the middle. I wanted to keep it for last, to help steady the door. Once that was done, I didn't know what was going to happen. I had a few theories, though. My stomach was twisting up at all of them. Success. I felt the last hinge pin fall free. The blood was dripping down my arm. I ignored it. Okay. I took a breath. It was dark. I knew Heather was there, but it was easy to let my imagination run free. It was just as easy to imagine someone behind us, someone sneaking up the stairs, someone that wasn't supposed to be there, someone who hadn't been there before. I shut that down real fucking quick. We were almost free. I wasn't going to let fear stall us now. "Heather," I said, reaching for the last and final screw. My fingers were almost numb. They were twisted in there so tight. "Yes?" She'd been sitting on the stairs, but stood now. I began to twist, and I felt the door becoming more and more loose. "This door is heavy. We're at an angle. We're beneath it. When you're done, it's going to fall." She was steady. Her voice sounded calm. I stopped unscrewing, just for a moment. "You're not scared?" Another snort in disgust. "Fuck yes I am, but you're not giving up. I won't either. You're doing all the work. It's the least I can do to help you how I can." Here was the old Heather, so sure of herself, so strong and confident. Relief surged through me, letting me breathe a bit more oxygen. I felt my lungs fill up. "Okay, yeah. That's what is going to happen. When I'm done, this door is going to go. It might even go before that. And it would plunge down on anyone that was sneaking up to scare the shit out of us, or kill us, whichever came first. I knew it was a figment of my imagination. No one was there, but still, I could have sworn I heard a third set of breathing. My ears were playing tricks on me, just like they had with Taylor's phone. I stopped. The screw was almost out. I could pull it out in a few heartbeats. "You ready?" She grabbed onto my arm, and I heard her tighten her hold on the handrail. "Ready." I didn't get the chance to pull the screw out, or have it fall. The door gave way first. It fell, knocking against my shoulder, but it swung to the other wall. The screw held fast, for just a moment, which stopped the door from taking us out. Then suddenly there was a harsh sound of metal being torn, and a loud thud and boom. The door hinge had torn off, and the door dropped. It hit the stairs once, then flipped and landed on the floor. I had a stinging shoulder and numb fingers as my reward. Stepping out, I ran smack dab into a chest. Hands grabbed my arms. "What the fuck?" I almost cried out. It was Mason. He'd found us. I was sitting on the bathroom counter with Mason standing between my legs. He was bandaging my fingers, while I held an ice pack to my shoulder. Heather sat on the toilet with the seat down. A blanket was draped over her shoulders, and she was resting her elbows on her knees. When Mason found us, or when I ran into him, he took a page from my book. He started raising holy hell, too. The entire haunted house tour was paused, lights were switched on, and Logan ran to find us. We were bundled up and swept into a bathroom, and that was where we were now. "I swear to God, Sam, I didn't do this." Logan sent someone to the store to grab a first aid kit. He'd begun pacing while he waited for them, and once it was brought up, he'd been pacing back and forth in the bathroom ever since. I glared around him. He went past where Mason's back obstructed my view, and I moved my head. I wanted to maintain constant glaring status. I loved Logan. He was family, but I was beyond livid. I snapped. "Bullshit! I didn't!" His hand hadn't moved from the top of his hair. He was pulling at it. "I mean it. I told the guys to show you to the basement as soon as you got here. I didn't even know about that room. The door..." He stopped. When they flicked the lights on, a large hole stood before us. But when we looked down, I felt new chills. The door looked exactly like the rest of the kitchen's walls. It was a secret door, secret room. The whole thing was camouflaged. And if I'd been in the kitchen during daylight, I would have walked right past it like Logan was saying he had. I had no idea how we'd found it, but we had. I believed him, of course I did, but I was scared and I was mad, and I wanted someone to blame. Logan was throwing the party, so he got the brunt of it. I wasn't alone in the glaring. Mason was doing his share, and Heather hadn't stopped. She was almost camouflaged under the white blanket someone found for her. Some of her pink mane was sticking out. That guy did it then. He told us to go down there. What guy? The one with the chainsaw. Heather added, chainsaw asshole, that guy. Logan didn't say anything. He stared at me, then Heather, then Mason. My stomach dropped again. I was getting tired of this sick feeling. But I had to ask. What? He exchanged another look with Mason before his eyes found mine. He said, "There is no chainsaw guy." Chapter 11. Logan! Heather came out of her seat. It was like she had lifted off. She literally came out of the seat at him. Her eyes were irate. Don't you dare joke like that. There was a chainsaw guy. Another guy talked to him. We aren't crazy. He started to shake his head, dead serious, then stopped, and a smirk showed. I'm kidding. Of course there was a chainsaw guy, but he told you the wrong door. We really didn't know about that room. The real basement door was just past it. He leaned back against the doorframe and crossed his arms over his chest. I have no idea how you guys even found that door. The doorknob. He swung his gaze my way. I know, but no one else saw that knob, I swear, Sam. I don't think it was there before. He held his hands up, palms toward me. No one, I mean not one person, saw a doorknob there before tonight. Swear to God. That didn't make anything better. A wave of helplessness crushed down on me. I rested my forehead against Mason's chest. He finished bandaging my hands, but once he was done, he smoothed a hand down my back. You in pain? He said that so softly it almost broke me. I swallowed the pain, I swallowed the defeat, and looked up. I'm fine, but I'm kinda not in the partying mood now. He nodded. His hand was still on my back as he twisted around to Logan. I'm going to take them back to the house. Heather let her head fall back. Thank goodness, I'm so down for that. Logan nodded, his hand scratching the back of his neck. He was giving me an odd look. What? His eyes skimmed over my costume, then Heather's. Do I ask what you guys are? I snorted. Not the time for that. Okay. He nodded, then his hand dropped from his neck. Oh, hey, where's Taylor? My body's temperature dropped 2 degrees. My blood was ice cold again. What do you mean? I felt a lump form in my throat and keep growing. I knew. I so knew what he was going to say, and I had known it from the beginning. Something happened to Taylor. He spoke, and a buzz started in my ears. His words sounded like they were coming from a distance. She said she was with you guys today. She didn't come to the party tonight? I saw Heather gasp. I didn't hear it. Her mouth dropped open, her eyes shot to mine, and the small amount of color she'd gotten back drained once again from her face. Something had happened to Taylor. The alarms were blaring in my head, but I coughed, forced that fucking lump away, and managed, I'll give her a call once we get home. We couldn't panic. Not yet. I had to get back to the house. I'd heard that ringtone. I'd rip the fucking house apart if need be, and if she wasn't there, if she hadn't just fallen asleep or decided to use Nate's room for some reason, or maybe she'd gotten locked in the closet, who the hell knew. I wanted to get there and look first, and then I'd start raising holy hell all over again. Mason felt my body tense and shifted back to get a better view of my face. What he saw made a wall slam down over his features. He glanced from me to his brother, and his jaw clenched. His hand pressed harder on my back, but he controlled his voice. It came out like he was annoyed, but not too worried. "What's the fastest way out of here?" Logan paused in the doorway, his eyebrows pulled together. Mason's smile was strained. "So we don't have to go through the whole haunted house part of it." "Oh." Logan's eyebrows smoothed back out. He gestured to the bedroom that our bathroom was attached to. "I'll show you guys the way back." The short trek took forever. Every second that I had to pretend to be calm stripped a year from my life. I was almost shaking with the effort by the time Logan opened that last door and I saw the night air. I shot past him, but I couldn't race for the street. I didn't know where Mason had parked. It was another few seconds that seemed like lifetimes before Logan waved us off and shut the door behind him again. Mason didn't waste time. "What happened?" I gritted my teeth. "Where's your Escalade?" He pointed toward the back of the house. "I got a spot in the alley behind the house." That was enough. I tore out of there. I was the one who'd gotten hurt, so everyone else needed to keep up with me. I wasn't slowing down. Mason ran ahead of me and had the vehicle unlocked and the engine started by the time I hopped in. Heather was a few beats behind, and once he took off and our seatbelts were on, I said, "She didn't answer her phone. All day. She didn't answer." I began searching the console. "Where's my phone?" He didn't show me fast enough, and my voice rose. "Where's my phone?" Here. He pulled my and Heather's phones out of his pocket. I checked again. There were my calls for Taylor. I hit dial again. I had to try once more. Nothing. It went straight to voicemail. Panic rose up like vomit. I pushed it down, but my stomach wouldn't stop clenching. I choked out, "I called her when we left, and I heard the phone ring in the house. Please be okay." It stopped, and I called her again. It went through on my end, but I didn't hear it again. What if... Terror spliced through me. Did I really want to follow through in that thought? What if... The phone had been ringing. The phone was there. She was there. She had been there. It had been ringing, then stopped. It didn't ring again. She would have called out. She would have called me back, texted me. She would have said something. The phone was turned off. Someone else was there. Someone else turned it off. I started shaking. I didn't even know I was until Heather grabbed my arm, reaching around the seat's divider from behind. She scooted to the edge of her seat and leaned forward, her cheek resting against where my shoulder was by my seat. Her hand gripped my arm. "We'll find her." She's gone by now. I couldn't say that, though. I couldn't even shake my head. I knew. She was gone. Mason pulled into the driveway. He stopped and I threw my door open. I ran. My feet pounded on the sidewalk, going to the door. My heart was lodged in my throat. It was too scared to keep beating. The door was locked. I hit it, then bounced back. Not even reacting, I dug for my keys. My pocket. There were still no pockets. Fuck it. Fine. I grabbed under the step for the extra key. I fit the key into the lock. My hands were shaking now. The key fell. I grabbed it again and shoved it in. The lock moved and I was inside. That sound had come from upstairs. "Sam!" Mason raced behind me. He probably didn't want me going without him, or wanted me to stay behind, to let him look. I didn't care. Taylor. She was all that mattered. She needed me, only me. It didn't make sense, but I knew it. I felt it. I almost thirsted for it. My feet were a dull sound, stampeding up the stairs, like I wasn't hearing them, like I wasn't even there anymore. I was beyond, already searching the doors, looking for Taylor. I threw open Nate's door. Nothing. His bed was empty. I tore open the closet. The clothes he'd left behind fell off a hanger. Nothing. I could see every inch of the closet. There was nowhere to hide. She wasn't there. His bathroom next. No. The shower door was transparent. I could see inside, and it was empty. On to the next room. I was leaving Nate's when Mason shot past me. He tore into the extra bathroom there, but it was the same. Empty. We didn't even have a curtain hanging over the tub in there. No one used it. The drawers were too small. A body couldn't be folded up in them. I glimpsed someone standing behind me, paused at the top of the stairs, and I whirled around. A scream stuck in my throat. It was Heather. "Keep going, Sam. I need you." A voice spoke to me in my head. It was soft, low, soothing. It wasn't mine. It was Taylor's. Mason opened the hallway closet, but no. Again, no. Always no. It would always be no. The last door was to Logan's loft. He locked it sometimes, if we had people over, or if there was a big party going on. That was the only time he locked it. We all had locks on our doors so our stuff wouldn't get stolen. I yanked at the door handle. The door didn't move. Someone gasped. It might have been me. I didn't care. I whirled around, already feeling Mason behind me, and I stepped aside. He rammed into the door and it crashed open. It tore from the hinges. A second door. Lost. That thought was in the back of my mind, and a part of me, the part that was in the back of my mind, that was too afraid to come forward, started giggling at that. It was funny to her. It wasn't to me. I was acting on pure, blind rage at this moment. Mason went first, barking at me to stay back. No, if she was up there, I was too. If he was going there, I would too. I was with both of them. I wasn't staying behind, but I knew, just at the sight of how Mason's shoulders sagged, she wasn't there. There was one last spot. Mason stopped in the middle of the room. I veered around him. Logan and Taylor used a bathroom that was attached to the far side of the room. I crashed through the door. She was going to be there. I had visions of her in the bathtub, her throat slashed, blood dripping down her body, coating it even, and those eyes. I shuddered. They'd be glazed over and lifeless. Nothing. I stopped in shock. Absolutely nothing. The bathtub was spotless. 2 towels were folded on the side. A bar of soap next to them. It looked like a hotel. The shower was spotless as well. Wait. What? I had known. It was in my bones. I'd known I would find her here. I stepped back, stepping into Mason, whose hands came to my shoulders. I shook my head. I thought she'd be there. His fingers tightened. He started to say something when a blood-curdling scream ripped from beneath us. Mason and I both tore out of there. I could outrun him in long-distance runs, but not sprinting. He dominated. It's what he did for a living. But not that day, and not in that house. I ducked around him, pushing forward with a burst of speed I'd never used. I raced down the loft's small set of stairs, through the second-floor hallway. Heather was gone. I noted that in the back of my mind, but I kept going. That scream was beneath us. I barely touched the stairs. Beneath us. I kept repeating that in my head. Beneath us on the first floor. The hallway led to my room with Mason. There was a guest bathroom, storage closets, then our room. No, that voice in my head said. She wasn't giggling anymore. She wasn't soothing. She just sounded sad. She added, "The basement, Sam." The basement door was open. I touched down on the stairs, leaping my way down, and there was Heather. She was backed up against the wall, her eyes glued to the bathroom, her hands cupped over her mouth, but she kept screaming. I didn't think she'd ever stop. Not anymore. And I knew. I faltered now, coming to the open door. I reached for the handle to brace myself. I looked in. That voice in my head said, "Right spot, wrong bathroom." And there she was. She was just like how I knew she would be. Taylor was slumped in the tub, her head propped against the wall, eyes wide open to look at us, like she'd been looking at her killer. I couldn't. Another gut-wrenching scream. This one wasn't from Heather, it was from me, and that voice, that person who was in the back of my mind, pulled away from me. It wasn't safe to be in my body right now. I crumpled to the floor, still screaming, and I pulled away. I passed Mason, who sprinted behind me, his hand automatically reaching to comfort me, but also to steady himself. I was floating backward, away from them, up the stairs, through the house, out the front door, past Mason's Escalade, all the way down the street. And then I heard that voice in my head again. But it wasn't Taylor's, and it wasn't mine anymore. It wasn't sad or soothing or laughing. It was someone else's. He said, "Come to me, Samantha." Chapter 12. Taylor was dead. I couldn't make sense out of that or comprehend it. I don't think I wanted to. No, she wasn't. She was alive. She lied to Logan when she said she was with us because I searched for reasons. Because she wanted to surprise him, because she wanted to shop for a secret gift for him, because any reason except the real one. Then she'd be alive. Then she'd be breathing and sitting next to me. She wouldn't be covered in a blanket, and I wouldn't be sitting in a neighbor's living room having a detective ask me questions that I couldn't understand either. I became a robot. That's the only way I could keep going. Mason was wringing his hands together. He was in the kitchen just behind me. Heather was in a bedroom somewhere. They'd separated us and got a different detective to ask each of us what I was assuming were the same questions. I told them what I knew. Why hadn't I gone and searched for her if I'd thought I'd heard her phone? They'd asked me that 4 times now. Every time felt like another knife plunged into my stomach. I could physically feel it, and they would stop, adjust their grip on it, and yank it all the way through me. I would split in half. But every time they asked, I said the same thing. I wish I had. God, I wished I had. I was probably crying. They didn't care. I didn't care. My hands were wet, so I assumed it was from that. But maybe I should have stopped assuming things. I had assumed Taylor wasn't upstairs. I'd been wrong. What else had I assumed that was wrong? A bubble worked past the 2 halves of my body, where they kept putting their knife in, and found its way in my throat. Then up and over the lump that I had to stop trying to shove down. It came out, and when I heard what that bubble was, I was cringing again. Hysterical laughter that bordered on mania. I was a lunatic, and once the first bubble escaped, more kept coming. I couldn't stop them. The 2 detectives standing over me shared a look. I saw the sudden suspicion in their gazes. I mean, it had been there already, but it went to a whole other level now that they heard me laughing. I was having a gay old time. I was going on a roller coaster. I was at an amusement park. The laughter stopped then. Taylor and Logan fell in love on an abandoned roller coaster. Yes. The tears came again, a heavy wave each time, and they were cascading down my face. How did I get here? How did Taylor end up dead? Who did this? Why hadn't I looked upstairs? I whispered, "This is all my fault." The cops were talking to each other. Their heads snapped to mine. One bent down, resting his hands on his knees. He was peering down at me, almost on my level, but not, just above. He still had to maintain his intimidating height. He couldn't do that if I started thinking he was on my level, that he was kind to me, that he cared about me. He asked, "What did you say?" I looked up, not giving one damn what they thought of me. I was Taylor. She was dead. So was I. "This is my fault." The second detective moved quickly. He made a gesture behind his back. A uniformed policeman brought one of the kitchen chairs over, and he sat on it. He softened his tone, but I knew it was a farce. All of this was a facade. He asked, as if he did actually care, "What do you mean when you say it's your fault?" "I heard her phone. If I looked, she might be alive." She would be alive. "No, Sam." Mason overheard me, and he left the kitchen. 4 police got in his way, but he pushed against them. His eyes were only on me. He was holding an ice pack to his arm, like he'd been hurt. I frowned. When had he gotten hurt? He shook his head. "This isn't your fault. You could have been killed too. You have no idea." "But you were here." I clung to his eyes. They were the only part of him I could hold on to at that moment. "You were in the car. Heather was too. If I'd gone in, you would have come looking for me.
And whoever did this could have gutted you."
I flinched at that word, gut. But it was used correctly. She had been gutted. We all saw.
"Don't blame yourself, Sam. Please don't."
He was whispering. He was so agonized over what I was feeling. Another reason among so many others why I loved him. But he was wrong. I whispered, my throat burning, "I could have saved her." I knew I was right. I could have, and I hadn't. All of this was my fault. It wasn't long, but it seemed to take forever for the authorities to show up when they did. We didn't call them. One of the neighbors dialed 911 because of the screaming. We were still there, all still in our same positions when they came inside. Guns were drawn, then holstered when they saw there was no threat. Time blurred after that. I was led away, brought upstairs, and taken outside. I registered the feel of the air, and that I was crossing the street, then going into another home. Someone else lived there. I felt the aliveness of it. It was warm and loving, giving. It was what our house would never be again. At some point I was shivering or trembling, or I don't know. A blanket was draped over me at some point, but I don't think it was because I was cold. They sat me in this living room chair, and I wasn't allowed to leave. I could see outside, but I didn't want to. I was waiting now. Cop cars were everywhere, lighting up the street. An ambulance came. I didn't know why. No one was hurt. Wait, no. Mason had an ice pack. Maybe he'd been the hurt one. Or maybe that was how they transported her body. That made more sense. They'd have to take her to get examined because this was a crime. The morgue wouldn't come to take her for a funeral. She'd been murdered. Our house was a crime scene. We'd have to go to a hotel? I glanced up. The detectives were so suspicious of me. Would they even allow that? Maybe I'd sit in a cell. The thought of it almost warmed me. That made sense. I wasn't going to sleep anyways. I didn't think I'd sleep for the rest of my life. I could go there, be close to them for questioning, and I'd wait until they gave me answers. Who had done this? Why? Those were the most pressing ones. I heard the screech of tires. I'd been waiting for this, and I looked outside again. Mason looked over. He'd been waiting as well. A yellow Escalade careened to a stop. The door was thrust open and Logan launched himself out of the vehicle. I was sure the keys were still in there. The engine probably hadn't been turned off. I tensed, waiting. Then, there it was. Another blood-curdling scream from inside the house. I closed my eyes, knowing who the owner was, and held my breath. If he got in there, they wouldn't let him get far.
"Taylor!"
I looked. I didn't want to, but I did. There was an agony that stripped all the way down to my soul. The sound would be in my nightmares along with Taylor's body, and when I opened my eyes, I stood. The cops buzzed around me, alarmed by my sudden movement. Mason was moving too, but we weren't going anywhere. Logan was dragged outside, with 5 cops holding him back. Another 2 were in front of them, like a backup wall if he got loose. He wasn't who I was watching, though. They were bringing her out. Her body was on a stretcher, covered by a white sheet. Some of the blood had soaked through. I took another step toward the window. I raised my hand, touching the glass. This was her last farewell.
"Sam."
Mason's arms wrapped around me. His chin lowered to rest on my shoulder, and we watched as a member of our family was taken away. We wouldn't be whole again. There was now someone gone, and she couldn't come back. Chapter 13. We were released, or that was the word the cops used. We weren't allowed to go back into the house. We had to give them a list of what we needed to stay at a hotel. After they looked through our phones, we got those back. Channing came moments later, and he hadn't left Heather's side since she came back out from wherever the cops had taken her. The ride to the hotel was the quietest, longest, and worst ride of my life. I'd remember it forever. The moment when we pulled away from the house, away from the flashing red and blue lights. I looked back, and it was like I was seeing it in slow motion. Channing drove Heather, Mason, and me. Nate drove Logan. I couldn't deal with it. Any of it. Once we got to the hotel, a hot shower didn't help. I kept seeing her. The screams were ricocheting in my head. Heather's scream, Logan's, mine. They all melded together and became Taylor's voice. I shook my head. I was curled up in a hotel robe on the bed. I'd finished my shower, but left the light off. Felt appropriate. Channing and Heather got their own room, but Nate, Logan, Mason, and I all got a suite together. We had a main living area with our own bedrooms. Our bedroom door was open, just a small inch, and I could hear Mason's voice. I didn't know who he was talking to. I guessed Logan, because Logan wasn't responding. No one was responding. God. I choked back a sob, burying my head in the robe's sleeve. How had this happened? It wasn't supposed to, at least not to her. I didn't know how to handle this grief. Hating my mother, the knowledge that your father isn't really your father, losing friends. That grief was mine. I was an expert at handling that, but this, really losing someone, I was floundering. Big fat tears were rolling down my face, but I didn't move. What the hell would I do? What now? And Logan, I couldn't face him. He thought she'd been with me. That made her my responsibility. He was my family, the third member of our fearsome threesome, and I'd done this to him. It was like I'd gutted him and left him to bleed out.
Sam.
I looked up. I didn't sit up from the bed. I remained in my curled fetal position, but I merely moved my head back so I could see who stood in the door. Channing glanced over his shoulder, then back. His hesitation was obvious. His hand curled around the doorframe.
Mason said I could just come over and knock.
His eyes fell to my robe.
I can come back if you want.
No. I was dressed underneath. It didn't matter. I sat up now, pulling my knees close to me. What's up? How's Heather?
That's why I came in.
Another pause. He looked down.
She's not doing that well. I was wondering...
His hand went to the top of his head. It rested there before falling back down.
I shouldn't be asking this of you. You were closer to her. Never mind, sorry.
No, what? I wanted something to do. I needed something to do. He hesitated. He seemed torn, but asked,
could you come over and just hug her or something? She's just crying. Her brothers are coming, but you were with her. I thought it might help.
I frowned. There wasn't a word to describe how drained I felt. She doesn't want you there?
It's not that. I'm not leaving, but I hold her and she doesn't react. I just wonder if I'm the person she wants right now.
You are. I nodded. I said it with such certainty. You are. No one can replace you in her life. She needs you. His eyebrows were pulled together, but relaxed at my words. He nodded, blinking back some wetness, and coughed. He cleared his throat.
Okay, thank you.
He frowned again.
Are you okay? I mean...
He looked over his shoulder again.
Mason seems busy with Logan, and you're in here alone. Are you sure you don't want to come to the room so you're not alone?
He and Heather were family. Logan and Mason were mine. I should be with mine. I shook my head. I'll be fine. I'm going to join them. I just needed a moment.
Okay.
His lip twitched up in something that might have been a smile or a small grin. I didn't know what. Everything looked off to me now. Nothing was right. He left, and I was alone again. I could still hear Mason's murmurings, but still nothing from Logan. Where was Nate? But even as I thought it, I knew. He was probably with them. He was probably in the same room with them. Or maybe he was doing what I was doing, sitting, being alone, listening to them. Or maybe he was like Channing, not sure what to do, feeling helpless, trying to find out what to do, how to help, who else to maybe help. I closed my eyes and lay back down, curling into a small ball. I wanted to be as small as possible. I wanted to disappear, if that was possible. I waited. I didn't disappear. I couldn't. Lying here wasn't helping. My insides were still in shreds. I just didn't want to think about why. It would make me go insane. I stood, going to the door. I wanted Mason, but I couldn't be selfish and demand him. Logan was hurting the most. He needed his brother. Did Logan need me too? I was like his sister. I was his sister. I was Taylor's killer too. She died because I didn't save her. Maybe I should go and comfort Heather, anything to tear me away from where I was. I started to leave, then remembered to grab the key card on the table by the door.
Where are you going?
Mason was behind me. I couldn't look in his eyes. If I did, I'd collapse. I looked away. I'm going to check on Heather.
Oh. Okay.
I swallowed, but I still didn't look up. How is he?
Hurting, Sam. He could use you.
He has you.
He needs both of us.
No. My heart squeezed together. He didn't need the person who would always remind him of her. But Mason wouldn't understand that. He wasn't thinking about it, not really. I didn't have the heart to explain it to him. I shoved my hands in my robe's pockets, my shoulders hunched down, my head still hanging low. I'll be back, I whispered. I promise. Before he could say anything else, I reached behind me, opened the door, and slipped out. I rushed to Heather's room, but only because it was away from that suite. I knocked on their door. Heather? Channing? I waited. No response. I knocked again. Hello? No response. I tried the door. It opened and I stepped inside, just 1 foot. The room was cold. The lights were off. A breeze swept through the room, giving me the shivers. Heather? I raised my voice. Were they in the bathroom? My stomach sank to my feet. Would everyone be in the bathroom now? Was this the beginning of a perverted joke? But I crossed the room. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I ignored the pit in my stomach, and I knocked on the bathroom door. There was no response. I knocked again, then checked. The door was unlocked. I held my breath and pushed it open. Nothing. I didn't even feel the warmth that lingered when someone had just taken a shower. I turned back around. There was nothing in the room. There was no reason for me to believe they had even been in here. Did I have the wrong room? That was it, had to be it. I started for the hallway again, then heard a dash of footsteps in the hallway. Someone ran past where I was. I darted forward. Who was that?
I got to the hallway. It took 2 seconds, but they were gone. The tan and black floral pattern on the floor stretched up and down the hallway. No one was there. I started forward. I heard a soft click to my left, ahead of me. A door closed. My head snapped around again. No, the sound was away from the suite. I kept going. I didn't have shoes on. I wasn't dressed to leave the hallway, never mind the hotel. I'd have to go back if I didn't find anyone. Still, I pressed on. I didn't even know what I would find, or if I would find anything, but I kept going. I got to the end. Nothing. No one. I was sick of this. I let out a breath of air and started back for the room. I'd go back and call the front desk. I'd have them ring me to Heather's correct room. Another soft click. I knew I'd heard it this time. My head whipped back around, but still nothing in the hallway, not even the sound of the ice machine. The hairs on my neck were standing up. Then again, I don't think they had ever relaxed. I pressed a hand to my stomach, like that would calm me. It did nothing. I knew it wouldn't, but I had to try. I was walking back to the room. I hadn't realized how far I'd gone. I had 4 doors to go. 3, 2. I was at Heather's room again. Sam? I cried out, rounding and falling to the floor. My heart leapt out of my chest. It was Heather. She stood right behind me, clutching an ice bucket. I pressed a hand to my chest, making sure everything was still intact there, that nothing had exploded. You scared the shit out of me. Me? She pointed to me with the bucket. What are you doing? You're being all creepy and sneaking down the hallway. I followed you from the stairs. The stairs? Yeah, I went down there to get ice. Ours is out of order on this floor. Did you take the elevator? No, why would I? It's just 1 floor. So that had been the door click. My heart is still racing. I got up, but still held my hand over my heart. But what about the second door click? The thought nagged me. I would have seen her. I was looking up and down the hallway, and come to think of it, where was the exit sign? I didn't see it. Where are the stairs? She motioned to the door I'd just passed. I widened my eyes. It looked just like another bedroom. Wait, that didn't make sense either. I shook my head. None of this was making sense. Those hairs, they were standing straight up, ramrod straight. There was no slouching. They were at full attention. I asked, how'd you know that was the stairs? Channing told me. What? He said that they switched the signs around, something about not letting media up here, and that this is the door I needed to use for my smoke breaks. Where is Channing? She frowned. He said he went to talk to you. I went to get ice after that. Oh. I could relax again. He probably went to look for you like I just did. Yeah, maybe. She shrugged and went to the room. I followed her, but stood in the doorway. She looked fine, unlike what Channing had claimed. I asked, are you doing okay? She half laughed at me. Are you serious? I should be the one asking you, not the other way around. Oh. There was no reason for me to stay here. I looked over my shoulder at the suite door. Maybe I should go and see how Logan was doing. Maybe he actually did need me. I let out another sigh. I just wished I knew what I should do. But how are you doing? Heather put the ice down, then reached for her cigarettes. She folded them into her pocket and pulled on a sweatshirt. I looked back at the ground. I didn't want to think about her. Then I wouldn't even be able to stand. I think I want to process it later. Okay. She held up her cigarettes. I have to get out of here. I need a smoke. You want one? You look like you could actually use one, but don't get addicted. She grinned, the smile not reaching her eyes. "I've heard they're really bad for you." She used to tell me that. She stopped, clasping her eyes tightly shut. She bit down on her lip and her head hung low. Oh, God. All the feelings came rushing in. I started to slide down to the floor. I could feel the sobs coming. I wrapped my arms around myself, warding everything off. I did not want to fall apart. Heather rushed to me. She slid an arm around me and helped me stand. "I'm sorry, Sam." She tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear. "I'm so sorry." I couldn't talk. We stood there, her arms around me, my own arms around me, and I took a moment, just one. I had to keep going after that. And after a few moments passed, I nodded. I stood straight again. Heather pulled away, still frowning. "You better?" I flashed her a grin, knowing it was broken. I didn't care about that. I couldn't. "Enough." "Okay." We stepped back into the hallway. I went toward the suite. She went to the weird stairway door. She opened it and put one foot inside, pulling her cigarettes out again. "You sure you don't want one? Not trying to push bad shit on you, but..." The little light she had in her eyes dimmed. "You know." I shook my head. "Thank you, but no." "Okay." "Hey." I stopped her. She looked back up. I gestured to my door. "Find Channing and come in when you get back." She started to nod. She started to say, "I will," when a gloved hand appeared around her head. Her eyes bulged out, her mouth opened to scream, but a hand covered her mouth. I had 1 second of warning before the knife was brought to her throat, and in a nanosecond, her throat was slashed. "No!" Blood spewed from her throat, and her body slumped to the ground. I froze. Her eyes, like Taylor's, had been alive. They had been alarmed. They had been frightened. And then, like Taylor's, they'd become lifeless. And I couldn't look away. Chapter 14. The suite door crashed open and Mason rushed out. "Sam!" I couldn't look away, and I fell to my knees. It was like Taylor all over again. Mason came to stand behind me. "Shit." He knelt by me. "Sam." There was no comprehension. "Sam." His hand touched my shoulder. "Who did this?" "Who?" I looked up. There'd been a gloved hand. There was nothing again, just like the other time. That word gurgled out of me. "I don't know." They could have killed me. The fight or flight hadn't kicked in for me. I screamed and then froze. "What? Oh my God!" Logan rushed from the suite. Mason yelled past us. "Nate, stay there! But stay!" I looked up. I didn't want Logan here either. He shouldn't have to see Heather like this too. "No." I began shaking my head, standing, holding my hands out. "Logan, don't be here. Go back inside." His eyes were glued to her. Then he pulled them with an effort to my face and down to my hands. He didn't look away. A vein bulged out on the side of his neck. "Sam." A breathless whisper. He started to reach for my hands. "Is that yours?" "What?" I looked at my hands. They were covered in blood, but I looked back at Heather's body. I hadn't touched her, had I? This blood. I lifted my hands higher to see. Then I looked at myself. I wasn't cut. It wasn't my blood. "She touched her." Mason blocked Logan and me from seeing Heather. He stood between me and her. His hands came to my shoulders. They were firm, authoritative. "Go back inside, both of you." "Who is it? I can't see." Nate spoke from behind us. Mason was blocking him too.
Fuck that.
Logan frowned. He wasn't trying to look at Heather around his brother. If anything, he backed away a step.
What are you going to do? Someone killed her in front of Sam. I'm going to look for him. What?
Logan and I spoke as one. I rounded on my boyfriend. No, you're not.
Sam.
He gentled his tone.
I have to search for whoever did this. They could have hurt you too.
They could have done worse than that. But neither of us said those words out loud. We were both thinking it, and I saw the plea in his eyes. He wanted me to let him go, let him look. I shook my head. No way. I reached for him. You go, I go. Logan cursed and stepped up to us. He avoided looking at Heather.
We all go.
That vein popped out again. He looked down at the ground.
Does Channing know?
Nate asked from the door,
What's going on?
He was ignored. Mason looked at me. I shook my head in response to Logan's question.
Logan swore again. We need to tell him, and we need to call the cops. I'll find Channing.
Mason pointed back to the suite.
Get in there, deadbolt the door, and call the police. Mace!
Mason had started to go. Logan stopped him, uttering that one word. Mason looked back. Logan shook his head.
You're not going anywhere without us. We all go inside and call the cops.
Nate cleared his throat.
Yes, come back in here.
I asked, and if Channing comes back and finds her like this?
I don't care. For all we know, he's the one who did it.
I frowned. Logan avoided looking at me too, but added to what Mason had said.
We don't know who did it, Sam. You have to be cautious. With everyone.
Not them. They had been behind me in the suite. Not them. Mason muttered a curse under his breath, running his hand over his face.
Fine.
He grabbed my elbow and began walking me back. He used his other hand to push Logan forward too.
We all go in. We need the cops called 5 minutes ago.
We deadbolted the door. Nate went to the couch, Mason went to the phone, and Logan stood and stared at me.
Mason said you saw someone last night.
I nodded to him. A guy in a black robe and white mask.
Like Scream?
There were no facial features in the white mask. It was just a white mask.
No place for eyes, nose, mouth?
Logan narrowed his eyes. I shook my head.
How do they breathe?
Mason put the phone back down. He'd overheard.
Maybe the material is breathable and thin enough for them to see through.
Logan gave him a skeptical look, his lips thinning.
You don't know that. Neither do you. And what's your issue? You got a tone. You blame Sam for this?
Logan didn't answer, but his gaze came back to me. It was unflinching, hardened. His jaw clenched again.
Bullshit,
Mason threw right back, standing between us. He turned to face off against his brother. His back was to me.
For all we know, this is about her. Maybe she's the one he's obsessed with. Maybe he's saving her for last. And how would you know all this?
Logan's voice was so biting.
You seem to have put a lot of thought into this already.
Mason tensed.
Walk away, Logan, before you say something that'll affect our family. Shit.
It was so soft, so lethal.
Something already has.
But he walked away, and I moved into Mason, resting my forehead against his back. We stayed like that for I don't know how long. But I didn't want to move. The cops came, and everything was repeated. Enduring the cops was a nightmare in and of itself, but I answered the questions. We were moved to another hotel. The crime scene was too close to where we were staying. They wanted to search the hotel anyways. Once everything died down, I just sat there. They never found Channing. They were supposed to tell us the moment they did. It was Taylor. We were trying to get our bearings. Then it was Heather.
Sam.
It was 3 a.m, but no one was sleeping. Mason and Nate had both gone to check on Logan, but I wasn't in the room with them. I didn't want to go in there, not yet. I looked over now. Mason was closing Logan's door behind him, crossing to where I was sitting. I was smack dab in the living room, facing the hotel door. The lights were off except for the soft glow from 2 lamps in the corners. I would have thought it was a romantic setting if I didn't know the reason we were there. "Hey," I murmured back. His hand came to my shoulder, sliding to the back of my neck. I closed my eyes, relaxing into his touch. I sought solace there, but only for a second. I couldn't any longer than that. There were things to do, emotions to ignore, and a killer to handle. I was shoving down all the normal emotions a person might have after having 2 friends murdered in such a quick amount of time. I was stewing. I was letting my anger churn inside of me. It was giving me fuel to keep going, and that was all I had at that moment. Mason stepped closer, and I rested my head against his stomach. He asked, sliding his fingers up through my hair, "How are you?" I shook my head. I didn't want to talk at that moment. I reached up and held onto his arm, keeping him anchored to me, and he moved in even closer. No, that wasn't right before, to think I only had my anger left. I still had Mason and Logan. Mason was comforting me, content to let me not talk. I was drawing in strength just by being near him. He was reaffirming what I needed to do. I looked back at that door. I was waiting. That's what I was doing. And as if the killer could see me, could know what I was doing, a snarl came to my lips. "Come and get me, you asshole." And as if I could hear him too, he murmured in my head, "I'll be right there." Chapter 15.
"Samantha."
I woke, my heart pounding, and bolted upright in bed. When had I gone to bed? But I looked around. Mason was sleeping next to me, his eyes closed, his chest lifting up and down at a steady pace. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the exhaustion pulling at me. It wanted me to lie back down and let it take over, but no. I heard my name. That's what woke me up. I moved to the edge of the bed and started to stand up when he showed up in the doorway. I could only stare at first. There was no scream, no gasp, just the view of a man in a black robe with white all over his face. There were no eyes, no mouth. It was like he wasn't even a person. I froze. Ice-cold fear ran down my spine and chilled my entire body. "Run, Sam! Tell Mason! Wake Mason! Get Mason to safety! Get yourself to safety!" All of those thoughts raced through my mind, but I couldn't do a goddamn thing. I could only gape at him, and he stepped into the room, showing a knife in his hand now. A choked gurgle came out of me, and I felt Mason move in the bed.
"Sam,"
he murmured, the same exhaustion I'd felt seconds ago evident in his voice.
"What's going on?"
He ran a hand down my arm. I was shaking. That's what woke him up. I was making the entire bed tremble beneath us. He felt the quaking tremors in my arm and sat up.
"Sam!"
The words died in his throat. He saw him too. Unlike me, Mason didn't freeze, but almost levitated out of the bed. He lunged for him, but the guy was gone. Mason fled the room, and I heard the door slamming shut seconds later. I still couldn't move. He'd been here. He was standing over us. He could have killed us. One plunge, one swipe at the right angle, and Mason would be bleeding out on the floor right now. Now I felt the bed shaking. It was like an earthquake.
"Sam!"
Logan appeared in the doorway, pale and wide-eyed. He braced himself, resting both hands on the doorframe.
"What's going on?"
Finally, words came out of my throat, but Mason returned, saying,
"The killer was here." "What?"
Logan's mouth dropped, his hand fisted into his hair.
"He was here?" "He got away."
Mason shouldered past him and stood over me, his eyes narrowed.
"He okay?"
I bounced my head up and down. That's all I could manage.
The fear still had a paralyzing hold on me. He waited for my answer, then closed his eyes and drew in a deep breath.
Fuck.
He sank onto the bed beside me, catching his head in his hands.
Fuck! He was here! We have to move! No!
Mason stopped Logan, reaching for the phone.
We have to call the cops. What for? The fucker's not getting caught. He keeps showing up.
Logan clipped his head from side to side.
No way. We take care of him ourselves. What are you saying?
Mason asked.
That we take care of the fucker ourselves. We set a trap, catch him, then call the cops.
Mason didn't reply, not at first. He stared at his brother. The two were embroiled in some form of stare-off, but I knew Mason was contemplating Logan's idea. Logan was waiting. Call for help, to those who hadn't helped us so far, or do the deed ourselves. Fear like I'd never felt before pooled at the bottom of my spine, but I already knew what we were going to do. It was what we always did. We fought. And a moment later, Mason said what I knew he'd say.
Let's catch the fucker.
Logan dipped his head in a nod this time.
Good.
He pounded the doorframe.
I'll wake Nate up. We should...
Mason finished for him.
Move locations. I've already got an idea.
I waited to see if Logan would look at me before he left. He didn't. This killer was here because of me, I was sure of it, and he'd murdered Taylor and then Heather. We never had found out anything about Channing. The killer could have taken him out too, but I was feeling the weight of both my friends' deaths. It was like they were with us in that room. They were beside me, breathing down my neck. It was my responsibility to avenge them.
What's wrong?
Mason had been watching me, and his hand came down to rest on my knee. My insides were twisting together. I felt the need to purge myself, throw everything up, but I just stuffed the urge down. Nothing.
Sam.
No, I mean it. I'm fine. I wanted to get this asshole. I wanted to take the knife and plunge it into his heart.
You're pushing me away. Don't do that.
Why not? I couldn't hold back the bitterness. You might stay alive that way.
Come on.
No, I mean it. My voice rose in volume. You want to catch this killer? Let me go. He'll follow me. You can follow him, or better yet, just tell the cops. They'll follow me. But not before I killed him. He'd appeared to me tonight. I saw his hand before he killed Heather. He was showing himself to me more and more. I felt like there were unspoken rules. He could have a knife. I wasn't supposed to have anything, but screw that. I'd take a gun. He'd show himself, and this time, instead of freezing, I'd just raise that gun and pull the trigger. I could do it. Sickening waves of disgust rolled down my back. I could do it. I could kill someone, especially someone who was killing my friends. Not Mason, not Logan. He would not get them too.
We're not using you as bait.
Mason stood and began to change clothes, pulling on dark sweatpants and a black shirt. It fit snugly, molding to his physique.
He called to Logan, "You ready?"
He began stuffing clothes in his bag.
Sam, get up. We have to get going.
I nodded, sliding off the bed. Sure. Even my voice sounded normal, but I wasn't normal. This was not happening how they wanted, and my mind was racing. Could I go with them, wait till they're somewhere safe, and then go on my own? As I was contemplating it, I already knew it wouldn't work. We might go somewhere I couldn't leave on my own, or worse, the killer would follow, and instead of leaving them, he'd kill them first. I had to go now. That was resounding in my head. Now, Samantha, now. I dressed as Mason grabbed the little we'd left in the room. I could hear Logan doing the same. I was sure Nate was too. I put my sneakers on and stood at the door. This felt wrong. No, it didn't. That wasn't what I was feeling. It was ice-cold fear, spine-chilling, but this was right. I had to finish this. I'd run. That's what I'd do. It was what I did best. I'd run, and I'd force the killer to run too. I could best him or her at that.
I bested almost everyone I knew, but I needed a gun. As Mason and Logan were moving around me, a tentative plan began to formulate in my mind. I needed a reason to leave. I looked around the room, but there was nothing I needed to get badly enough that they wouldn't think twice before letting me leave the room. I didn't smoke. Wait. I felt my pockets and looked around. My phone was gone. Where'd my phone go? I couldn't remember where I'd put it last. I gotta find my phone.
What?
But Mason ducked into the bathroom. Now. Logan was in his room too, and Nate's door was still closed. It was now or never. Hurrying to the door, my phone was on the counter. I snagged it and slipped out of the room. Once that door was closed, I picked up my pace, speed walking away from it. And when I didn't think they'd be alarmed by the sounds of my footsteps, I took off. Sprinting to the end of the hallway, I crashed through the door and fled down the stairs. The killer was around. He was watching. He would know. I pushed through the exit door, and after that, nothing held me back. The hotel was in front of the woods. I knew those woods well. A few running paths wound through them, connecting to 2 parks. I headed for those paths, tearing past the first trees. I didn't let up, going the fastest I'd ever gone. This asshole would try and catch me. No car, no bus, nothing. Not even a Segway could work on these paths. Dirt bikes, maybe, but even those would be hit or miss. This fucker had to go on his feet. It'd be the only way he could follow me. And I didn't let up until I came to the first park. I needed that weapon. I couldn't sit and wait for him without one. If I did, I would lose. It was my only chance to fight back. I looked around, my breathing shallow, my heart pounding. Cold sweat trailed down my back. Gun, gun, gun. Where would one be? I needed one. A car? Nope. A little Toyota like mine? No. I looked at the people in the park. A pair of mothers pushing strollers. No, 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 no. I wasn't seeing anyone who might have a gun. The pressure was building. I needed to find something. A house? Could I break into a place? A gun store? I almost started laughing. I'd get arrested. The killer could kill me off when we were cellmates. I was going to die. I wouldn't be able to defend myself. Wait. A truck pulled into a parking spot, and a guy and girl got out. Yes, he had Texas license plates. I began heading for the truck. They walked farther down the hill. The guy turned back once, and I flattened myself against a tree. If his suspicions were raised, yes, yes, yes. As I watched, he turned back. His girlfriend was going to a farther section of the park. If he followed her, he wouldn't be able to see his truck. Maybe there'd be an alarm. If I broke his window, I'd have to grab the gun and get out before he could follow me too, or send the cops to where I was hiding. Shit, this was getting complicated. Okay. I relaxed a little bit. The guy kept going forward, following behind his girlfriend. I moved closer to his truck. A gun rack hung off the back of his truck. Chances were good he'd have some type of weapon in there. I stood on my tiptoes, cupped my hands around my eyes, and tried to see inside his truck. Nothing. Some beef jerky, a scented decoration hanging from the rearview mirror. But wait. I began to look in the back, but a black bulge between the 2 seats caught my eye. I zoomed back, and yes, I thought it was a gun. I was pretty sure. Hold up, was I really sure? I had to be sure. My phone was buzzing. Mason and Logan were probably calling. Yes, I had to go. Even now, the killer could be on me. I drew a deep breath, grabbed a rock, and lifted it. I was ready to throw it against the window, but I glanced at the driver's side door. It was unlocked. No way, I couldn't be that lucky. The passenger side door was locked. His wasn't. This guy. I sent up a prayer and ran to his side, opened the door, and reached forward. My hand wrapped around the black shape, and I pulled out a handgun. God, my hand was shaking. Bullets? Was it even loaded? I pushed on the chamber, pulling it out, and yes, 3 bullets were in there.
I put the chamber back and breathed out slowly to steady my nerves. Logan had insisted on going to the gun range a few times. I'd thought he was nuts, but I went later with Mason a few more times. He'd helped me learn how to shoot. I just needed to remember his words. I swallowed a lump in my throat. It was time. It really was just me now. Making sure the safety was on, I held the gun in a tight grip and began running again. I went deeper into the woods. The forest could extend for miles and miles. I didn't care. The farther away from civilization, the better. I ran for 2 miles. When I stopped, I was farther in the woods. It was then, and only then, that I stopped and bent over to gasp for breath. My phone had been continuously buzzing. I pulled it out, seeing 28 missed calls from Mason and almost the same number from Logan. 40 text messages filled my inbox. "Please forgive me," I thought as I turned my phone off. Then I sat. It was just me in the forest. We were waiting for him. I heard the first footstep crunch over the gravel. Everything in me was primed for action. I was sitting at the base of a tree, 12 feet off the path. I was already dressed in dark clothing from before, but I tucked my sneakers under my legs. They were neon yellow, and they were my weakness. Or one of them. Another footstep. He was being so quiet, slinking along, but I kept my breathing even. Years of marathon training were helping me out now. I couldn't see him, not yet, but a third footstep wasn't too far away. I was searching the path's shadows for him. He'd have to stick out. He should have the mask. I was waiting. I was looking. A fourth footstep. Gravel crunched beneath it again. It was like he wasn't there, but I knew he was. He had to be. That's what made sense, if he'd followed me instead of them. A flash of light, moving. He was on his phone, and that's when I saw him. It was him. I couldn't see him that well, but it was him. I knew it. He was all black. I couldn't see the mask, but it was him. I felt it. He was standing right in front of me on the path, punching numbers on his phone, and then he waited. God. I bit down on my lip, closing my eyes for one agonizing moment. A dial tone rang, then my voice sounded from his phone. "This is Samantha, leave your— Logan, I was recording!" Beep. The killer was calling me. I sat there stunned. I'd turned my phone off, but he would have found me in 2 seconds if I hadn't. Fucking hell. He knew my number. A ton of bricks landed on me. The killer knew me. I knew the killer. "Sam!" No. I froze again. No. That was Logan. "Sam!" He was coming down the path. I turned. The killer vanished. Who was he? Who could he be? I kept trying to think, but then Logan was coming fast. He was almost to us. If I said something, I would be exposed. If I didn't, he would be dead. I held my breath, waiting. I didn't know what to do. "Sam, where are you?" But he didn't stop. He soared right past where I was sitting. I almost sagged from relief, but I heard a rustling sound. A black shape began to grow in size until he was standing up. The killer had stepped back out onto the path from where he'd been hidden. My teeth sank through my lip, breaking skin. Something warm and liquid seeped out, but I wasn't paying attention. The killer turned to follow Logan. He was going after him. I wanted to yell, scream, stop him. Calm, Samantha, think. If I revealed myself now, he would kill me here. He could go after Logan anyways. Where was Mason? If Logan was running down this path, was Mason on a different path? Did Logan say he would cover the running paths and Mason would search somewhere else? My time for sitting was dwindling, and fast. The killer was farther away. I had to go now. I didn't feel my legs. Everything was becoming numb, but I reminded myself to be quiet. He couldn't hear me. If he looked back, he'd see me. My shoes were my weakness. I needed to make sure he had no reason to look back. Silently, I stood and stepped out onto the path. I crept forward, spying the killer's black shape in the darkness around us. When he moved, I moved. I tried to time every step to his. I gripped the gun tightly against my leg. If he looked, I'd shoot him, or try, but I didn't want to risk the shot from where I was. I had to make sure I got him. I had to draw closer. I sent up another prayer above for help. Where was Mason?
Sam!
That was Logan, but farther away. It was quieter. Keep going, Logan. Just keep going. Don't turn back. As if hearing my thoughts, the killer slowed. So did I. A silent gasp left me, and I didn't dare move. Not 1 inch. I could hear Logan running farther and farther away, but this guy wasn't moving. He cocked his head up, like a panther listening for new prey. If he turned around, I was gone. I had no choice. I couldn't keep trying to sneak closer to him. It was now or never. I raised the gun, and I waited. If he turned, he did. He turned halfway toward me, then stopped. Shit. My heart was pressed into my chest cavity. It was trying to work its way out of me. I could barely hear anything anymore. My heartbeat was deafening in my ears. Then I waited. My finger was on the safety. I'd have to remove it, then quickly shoot him. He'd hear the safety. I had to wait. I couldn't unlock it yet. 1, 2, 3. He began to turn all the way. Another half second and he'd see me. But then someone ran ahead of us. Whoever he was, or she, they were moving fast. There was another path that ran across ours. I hadn't known it was there, but this person was going fast. Fuck. Mason? Could it be? He hadn't been yelling my name, but that wasn't Mason's way. He'd be silent, stalking, and dangerous. He would run like this. Suddenly, they zipped past us. The killer whipped back to the front, where he'd been facing before, and he brought the knife up, like he'd have to defend himself. He looked where the person ran, pausing. Then he ran after them. I couldn't move. Good God. I lowered the gun, my arm visibly shaking. My knees were knocking against each other. I had just missed my chance, but I hadn't known for sure if I would have gotten him. My legs were like jelly. I literally couldn't make them move.
Samantha!
I turned around. Logan was behind me now? What? It clicked at the same time that he hit me. If I turned around, if I heard Logan behind me, so could he, and there he was. He took me out, tackling me to the ground. The breath was knocked out of me, his heavy weight anchoring me for a moment before I realized what he was doing. No! I screamed. He was keeping me in place as he was reaching for the gun still in my hand. Shit. No, you fucker! I had to fight for that gun, or I was dead. The knife, too. I looked for it. He was holding it in his hand. I twisted my arm between us and tried knocking the knife out of his hand with my elbow. He was distracted for a moment, pausing to see what I was doing. The gun or the knife? He decided for me. He tossed the knife to the side and rolled, his shoulder jamming into my throat as he began tugging the gun from my hand. It was now a fight for that, and I cried out, feeling him clawing at my wrist and hand. He was tearing my skin apart, literally pulling it off in a desperate way. He was trying to get under the gun, to get a better hold on it.
Motherfucker!
Someone grunted right above us. I looked up, but they tucked their shoulder down and slammed into the killer. He was tackled onto the ground, caught and lifted off me in one motion. I scrambled up, or tried. I was bleeding. I could feel it from my arm, hand, my face. I could even smell it. Mason! I looked up and Logan was airborne over me. He launched himself into the wrestling foray. That was Mason fighting the killer. No, no, no. The knife. They were where it was. The killer knew it. Mason didn't. It was 2 to 1. I sat there dazed before I could think of what to do to help. I still had the gun in my hand. I began to raise it, saying, "Stop!" It came out a croak. He had hit my throat, and I tried again. A second hoarse whisper. I coughed, feeling blood spitting up my throat, and I yelled, "Stop!" This one worked. They did, freezing in place. Logan twisted around, his eyes wide. "Sam, the gun!" I had it pointed at him, and I gasped, correcting myself. I overcorrected, pointing it at Mason. The killer had a second, and he dove for the knife. "Mason, get back!" Too late. The killer grabbed the knife and brought it up, slicing the back of Mason's knees. "No!" But I felt it too. The knife cut Mason, and it cut me too. I could feel it behind my knee, and I crumpled, still holding the gun, or trying to. It was beginning to fall from my hand. "No!" Another croak. This couldn't happen. I couldn't lose everyone. I couldn't lose my family. "No!" The killer wasn't done. He brought his knife back. At the same time, Logan ripped out, "No!" and jumped at him. The killer rotated swiftly, the knife sticking straight out. Logan impaled himself on it. "No, no, no." I was whimpering those words. A gurgled gasp came from Logan. He began spasming, his back and entire body twitching, and somehow he worked his way farther onto the knife. Like with Mason, I felt the knife in me. It was like I was impaled on it, and my body was shaking and trembling. I was sinking farther onto the knife, past the part where I could come out of this at all. I was dying. It felt like I was dying. That meant Logan was dying. No. Ignoring all the pain, I raised the gun. If I was dying, so was he. He twisted back to me, weaponless, and it was my turn. I undid the safety, my finger went to the trigger, and I pulled it. The bullet slammed into him. Gasping, I surged upright. Everything was bright. It was too bright, and oh my God, the pain. It was everywhere. It was seeping from me, and I whimpered, my mouth muffled. I closed my eyes, wishing that brightness away. I wanted to go back where I was. I didn't want to be here. It hurt. My insides were being pulled out, one scoop at a time. I could feel them, feel how they were raw and exposed, how they protested individually. I couldn't. Please, God, take me away, take me back. I'd take those woods again, not this. Tears slipped down my face, and they felt like scalding burns.
Tisk, 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 Samantha. Wakey, wakey.
No, no, no. I want to go back to where I was, please.
No, no.
I could hear his enjoyment. It was sick and twisted. He was enjoying this, whoever he was. I didn't recognize his voice.
Come on, wake up.
More of a clipped tone now. He snapped his fingers, nudging me with a knife that had something wet, something warm on it. My stomach rolled over. I knew what was on that knife, but I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to comprehend it.
Come on.
He knelt in front of me. He poked me, and I screamed, bucking under his touch. I opened my eyes, and he pulled back a bloodied finger. It was mine, not his. My blood. I began writhing around on the floor. I wasn't consciously doing it, but I couldn't stop myself. I was flailing all over, like a fish on a hook.
Come on, stop that.
He kicked my side.
You were just doing that before, too. Don't know why. I didn't cut your tendons or anything. Stop it. We're about to move on to the second stage.
A breath. A second one. A third. I was able to stop, on my stomach now, with my head turned toward him. He wore large black boots, but regular jeans and a blue shirt. I angled my hand back, blinking against how bright it was. Blasts of sheer pain exploded in my head.
Come on, come on.
He tapped his knife against the side of my skull.
You've been out of it since I got you. I don't like to wait this long for some fun, and the best part is coming.
God. I opened my eyes wider to see better. I was on a bathroom floor. There was no killer in a black robe or white mask. The white wasn't him, it was the light behind him. The black had been the shadow of him as he bent over me. It had all blended together, and the pain... I gazed down. I was covered in blood. I was dressed in jeans and a shirt, but I didn't remember putting them on. Was it all a dream? A lie?
Yeah.
He knelt in front of me, the same knife from my hallucination in his hand. I couldn't see his face. I could only see the knife. His face was blurred, and he was waving it back and forth. It was covered in almost black blood.
Are you starting to get it? You've been whimpering and saying all sorts of weird shit. I finally had to muzzle you because I couldn't get any sleep myself. Your friends aren't dead. None of them are.
He grinned. I saw the whiteness of his teeth, how his lips pulled back. But I couldn't see him. He was still a blur to me. Everything else was in stark detail. He let out a deep sigh.
You're not going to get it. I can see that. I don't have time to wait another day. I've got a job to get back to. But we'll have to finish this now. Okay, Samantha. No, I've not touched your friends. Heather, Taylor, whoever else you were saying, Channing, Nate, Logan. You were especially concerned about Mason and Logan. He only got a knife wound in your dream. That babbling was entertaining at times. He got sliced, right? I heard that, right? Sometimes it was hard, deciphering what you were mumbling. You weren't the clearest. That was all in your head.
He tapped the knife against my temple again.
Your friends are fine. They aren't the ones dying.
I was dying. And I couldn't move. I was still on the bathroom floor. I tried to move my hands, but they were twisted behind me, soaked and covered in blood. I could even feel it between my fingers. I was even beginning to recognize the texture and weight of blood. A mangled cry ripped from my throat. I didn't want to die, but I couldn't move. My legs were tied together too. He was half kneeling over them now.
You ready?
He sounded disappointed.
I thought you'd be a better fighter than that. You spent the whole time trapped in your head, but okay. I have a date. Gotta get another girl, so here you go.
He brought the knife up, his mouth twisting into an ugly smile.
See you on the other side.
He brought the knife to my throat. Chapter 16. I sat upright in bed, and déjà vu settled over me. My third time in a row of suddenly waking. This time there were no woods, there was no bathroom. I was in bed. My bed. I heard deep breathing next to me and looked. Mason was curled toward me, his hand on my thigh. He'd been holding me. My heartbeat was stampeding inside of me, but I felt myself over. No knife wounds, no blood, just sweat. I could move my hands around. I could move my legs. I looked over Mason. He was peaceful, and he rolled to his back, his hand leaving my leg. The bed cover slipped down his chest, and I could see all his muscles were intact. He hadn't been stabbed.
Sam?
He opened one eye, squinting up at me.
What are you doing?
What day is it?
It's Friday.
You came home last night. I was breathless. The relief brought tears to my eyes. He opened both eyes now and lifted his head up.
Are you okay?
You carried me from the bar, right?
Yeah, you drank too much. You were out of it.
He reached up and cupped the side of my face.
Heather said the girls' night was a lot. But are you sure you're okay?
I patted myself down again, just once more, and flicked those tears away. I had a nightmare.
A nightmare?
He curved an arm around my waist again, bringing me down to him.
I'm sorry.
I started to melt back to his side, but a nagging feeling wouldn't settle. I had to know. I had to make sure. Reaching over, I grabbed my phone and texted Taylor, Heather, and Logan all the same text. "Are you okay?" Mason's hand rested just under my breast. I could feel him starting to fall asleep again. But I wouldn't be able to go to sleep again, not until I knew. I only had to wait a few seconds before the replies started filtering in. "Taylor." "Yeah, why? Are you?" I pressed a hand over my chest and could breathe easier already. One down, one was fine. Then Heather. "Channing and I just had fight sex, so not really. What's going on?" A second one. She was alive. Feeling tears in my eyes, I texted back. "Nothing. Have sex again, then again. Keep having sex until you guys forget what you're fighting about." She replied again, but it was late. Whatever she had to say, I was more relieved that she was fine. She and Channing would be fine too. They always circled back to each other. I was waiting for Logan still, and as if on command, my phone buzzed from his reply. Hashtag Logan's dick's inside his woman. Hashtag this is an automated text reply. Hashtag please reply during normal waking hours. Hashtag just kidding, his dick will be inside her again. Smiley face. All serious, you okay? You texted Taylor too. I groaned out loud, feeling the boulder that had been sitting on my stomach disappear. They were all fine. "Sam." Mason woke from my noise. His hand moved, and he tightened his hold on my breast. "Another nightmare?" "No." I laughed, more from relief than anything else. "I'm good. I'm fantastic, actually." "Yeah." He lifted his head, his eyes peering at me. I grinned at him, but sent a quick text to Logan. "Nightmare. Better now. Send my apologies to Logan's dick." Then I tossed my phone on the floor and settled back, feeling Mason moving over me. I looped my arms around his neck. I could be better, you know?" "Really?" He grinned, leaning down to nuzzle my neck. Everything was fine. Everyone was fine. With that last thought, I turned, seeking Mason's mouth with mine. Now it was my turn to be fine, and as his mouth met mine, I knew I would be. Later, much later, after we were both sated, I saw my phone blinking from the floor. Rolling over, I grabbed it and began to turn it over, but then something caught my eye, and I looked. A pile of clothes were on the floor. Mason must have left them, but I saw it was on top. There were no holes or openings for the eyes, nose, or mouth. I whipped back. Mason had fallen asleep after we had sex, but he wasn't asleep anymore. He was looking right at me, like he knew what I found. It was all a dream. Right. Keep listening for a bonus scene from Fallen Crest Nightmare. "Sam, what are we doing here?" "Shh." I squeezed Mason's hand, leading him away from his Escalade. He hadn't said a word when I told him I wanted to take him somewhere. He hadn't questioned me when I told him to dress all in black, complete with ski mask. He hadn't even raised his eyebrows when I was downloading sounds of women screaming, a chainsaw, and a little girl whispering, "I see you." And he never balked when I gave him directions that took us out of town and into the hills that overlooked a haunted maze. Glancing over my shoulder, I gave him a small grin. "Just ignore the sounds of people screaming below us." His eyes locked on me before he gave a slight shake of his head. "Okay." I led him to a perch. "I found this spot the other day when I was running. They were shaping the field into a maze. I didn't put two and two together until a guy in class mentioned it. Said he was manning it with a bunch of his fraternity brothers." Whoever owned the field below had sculpted the cornfields to show three major images. The bottom, where people entered the maze, was a giant pumpkin. They went in through the bottom of the pumpkin, and there were rows already started through its teeth, mouth, nose, and two eyes. And then the stem of the pumpkin joined with the rest of the maze. From there, the path split into two main directions people could take.
They could either go to the right, which led to a bunch of rows of corn that had been formed into the shape of a werewolf. The path that led them to the left would bring them into a witch riding a broom, and that path was the one that led the way out of the maze. But the people had to go through some wind machines, which were decorated to look like a bunch of ghosts, then the broom itself, and upward through the witch. She was pointing a hand in the air, and that was the exit point. Some rows were dark, but others were lit up. There were sections within the maze where my classmate and his fraternity were set up to scare people. Those sections were dark until suddenly light would shine for a second. People screamed, and it would go dark again. That was happening often enough to show that there were a ton of people going through the maze.
"This is huge."
Mason was studying the maze. I nodded. "They started it last year, but finished this summer." I glanced up at him. It felt wrong to bring him here, to have him see it for the first time while I'd been hearing about it in my class since August. It was Halloween weekend. He'd come after a game to see me, holding me while I woke from one of the worst nightmares I could ever imagine having. So tonight I wanted to have a little fun with just him. I murmured, "I've seen you almost every single day since high school." He tore his gaze from the field and looked to me. I held his eyes, looking into them as he was searching mine. This was how we were. We weren't just holding hands. We weren't just standing next to each other. We knew each other inside and out, heart, soul, and body. I kept on, my voice soft but clear despite the sounds below our perch. Every day, from when I was a junior in high school, then when I was a freshman in college, and until a few months ago. He was a year older, so this was the second temporary distance between us. He went to Kane a year earlier than I did, and I had to leave his side in Massachusetts to start my last year here. Threading our fingers together, I felt the rub of my engagement ring against his finger, and I couldn't stamp out that pride mixed with love and bittersweet sadness. It was good to miss Mason. I did, every damn day. But we had an entire lifetime together. This last year at university was mine to be with friends and train for my future. He wasn't the only one who was a professional athlete. I had an Olympic-sized future for me too. But until then, until we got married, until I was done with college, I wanted to have fun. And, focusing on the field beneath us, I wanted some revenge fun too. In a way, it feels weird being the one to tell you something about Kane. It was his place first. He came there first, and his brother and I followed the year after. But it became my place once he graduated. He had moved on, playing for the New England Patriots, so it was like I was sharing something with him that should have been his in the first place. As if reading my mind, which he seemed to do so many times, he pulled me to his side. His arm fit around my back, dipping under my shirt and holding onto my hip. I closed my eyes, feeling his lips on my forehead. He said, "We're apart for now, but it won't last. And I'm coming back to crash at the house during the off-season anyway." I blinked back a few tears. It was ridiculous, but the love I felt for Mason was more than me, more than where we stood, more than the skies above us. It was big enough to fill the galaxy at times, and yes, that was cheesy, but it was how I felt. It was the truth. A scream cut through our small moment, followed by an almost maniacal-sounding laugh. I sighed, recognizing the sound. "That's him."
"Him?
"Lawrence Yearly."
Who's Lawrence Yearly?"
Mason's chin rested on my head, and I leaned back against his chest. His arm fell down, encircling my waist. I let go of his hand so I could rest my own on his arm, dipping my thumb to slowly caress the inside of his wrist. I answered, "No one really." Of all the villains our group had come across, he was more of a gnat, but he was an annoying gnat. He hit on me the first week of classes, asked if you'd cheated on me yet. His arm tightened around me.
"He did what?"
"Don't worry." I swiped my thumb back and forth again, feeling his pulse thrum against the pad of my finger. "I told him to fuck off and say it to your face when you came to visit. He's stayed away since. But he torments a girl in class. I didn't know it had been going on since August, but I overheard it this past week. My stomach churned just remembering it. He complimented her breasts like they were actually people, and then kept licking his lips every time she got up from her desk or moved in class.
You know her?
Not personally. I know her name. I know she's super quiet. I know that I've been watching her this past week, and every time I see her on campus, she isn't with anyone else. She eats alone. I saw her studying in the library alone. I kept flipping each instance over and over in my mind. My gut was literally tightening into one hard knot.
And he's the guy you know down there?
Yeah, he's been boasting for a long time about this maze tonight. Who knows what sick shit he might be doing down there, grabbing people, scaring them a little more than necessary. I half expected my own memories to surface. I'd been bullied, kicked, ganged up on. I'd had my tormentors, but they weren't there. I no longer felt them swimming in the background. No. All that was there was a desire to give someone a small taste of their own medicine. Lawrence had tried with me, but he was shut down, and unlike some, he slunk away and stayed there.
Did you tell Logan about him?
I heard the slight roughness in Mason's voice. He was concerned about future retaliation, but that wasn't going to be a problem. The guy was scared of girls, picking on the ones that didn't stand up for themselves, that didn't know they could. So I would. And I wasn't alone. I didn't have my one friend anymore. I had a solid group of female friends, and we helped take care of each other. I bent down, dislodging myself from Mason, and pulled out my phone from a bag. I want to scare the actual shit out of him. It was small. It was a little petty, but it was something I wanted to do. Mason nodded, his eyes darkening.
The way you're holding your phone shouldn't turn me on, but you're fucking hot, Sam.
I cocked my head, smirking. Fuck yeah. Ready to do this? He didn't respond. He turned, grabbed the ski masks, and handed me one. Almost as one person, we turned for the path leading down to the haunted maze and pulled our ski masks down. We were about to hunt a hunter. I had studied the maze enough times when I ran on the hills that I had it memorized. We bypassed the main entrance since I didn't want to go through where everyone else did. I wanted to sneak in the back. Yearly was stationed by one of the ghosts right before the witch's broom started, so he wasn't completely at the edge of the maze. We did have to venture through a little. The masks covered our faces, and if someone saw us, they'd assume we were volunteers with the maze itself. I was banking on that. And when we slipped through a section where a bunch of people were in cages, it worked. They didn't reach out for us or screech. They were quiet, letting us get to our section. I hoped it would work for the next two. A bunch of mirrors was set up behind the cornstalks, and they were covered with strings of neon lights. I saw the flashing ahead of time, heard the clown's booming hysterical laugh over a megaphone, and knew people were walking ahead of us. I paused, holding Mason back a little. I wanted some space. When people went past those mirrors, they lit up suddenly. It went from complete darkness in that corner to the bright lights and images of yourself behind the corn. On top of that, a clown who was wearing a matching neon-lit costume would chase people. It wasn't that I'd get scared. I knew that clown was another one of Yearly's fraternity brothers. I didn't want to punch him if he tried to chase us. I shouldn't have even worried, because when we got there, the lights did go off. He started toward us, but two things happened at once. Mason moved in front of me, his shoulders going back, his head lifting as he squared off against the clown. And the clown braked so abruptly he almost fell over.
Oh, sorry.
He lifted a hand and the lights turned off.
I heard they were rotating some sections. You must be the new ones, huh? Yeah.
One clipped word from Mason, a matching nod, and we walked right past the clown. We had to go through 2 more rows. They kept each section far enough from the other to give people a break. Or at least I'd guessed that was why. But being in the maze, I realized they had another reason. They allowed enough space and distance from the other section so lights didn't travel ahead, giving people a glimpse of what was coming and ruining the surprise. It didn't matter because the last section was for us. I almost touched Mason's back to warn him. Unlike the last section, which set the mirrors on the other side of the corn, this one had put up walls of black plastic tarps. They were stretched tight with a ceiling above, like a tunnel. I saw them being put up during the day, but didn't know what they were used for until I heard one woman screaming about a snake. I had a feeling about what we would be walking into. Mason saw the tunnel and paused.
"What the fuck?"
he muttered under his breath. I was guessing, but I pressed against him, murmuring quietly in case someone was near us. I think they send fake snakes over our feet.
Shit.
His back tightened even more.
"Okay, let's go."
We treaded closer, not pausing or slacking in our stride. We were there for a purpose. We couldn't let them think we weren't a part of them, but once we stepped foot in the tunnel-esque area, I saw the fear factor. It added an extra layer of foreboding. Then, suddenly, a hand smeared with white neon paint pressed against the black plastic, and I felt something slimy touch a bit of skin by my ankle at the same time. I didn't look down. Nope, it was fake. It better have been fake. "We fucking work here."
"Oh,"
a voice said from behind the sheet a second before the hand disappeared.
"Sorry about that. We can't see the best from this side. Just saw your shadows and assumed, you know."
"Yeah." The same guy raised his voice a little, saying,
"Hold off, guys. The next two work here." "Got it. Okay. Do they have supplies? I radioed for water 30 minutes ago."
The voice closest to us said,
"You guys aren't here with food and drinks, are you?" "No."
Mason pressed a hand against the small of my back, moving behind me again. He urged me forward as he said over his shoulder,
"We'll pass the requests on, though. Thanks, man."
A few repeated his sentiments as we went by. The last one, the one who asked for water, added,
"Yearly's up ahead. He is the main radio. Can you tell him to order a pizza? I'm starving." "Yeah, sure."
I suppressed a laugh, but then we went a few feet, and I felt my stomach dip. We were nearing the entire reason we came out there. To be honest, I didn't have much of a plan. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision when Mason asked what I wanted to do tonight. Images of me sneaking up on Yearly, playing a chainsaw behind him, playing that woman's screams, or even that child's whisper, had been the extent of it. But as we went past those sections, I realized the scream wouldn't scare him. I wasn't sure if the chainsaw would either. Maybe the abruptness of it? That it would come from behind him and it wasn't the one he was holding? I knew he was the guy starting the fake chainsaw and chasing people with it. He had bragged about it in class, his chest puffing up when he described how fast he would make those fat asses run. Mason was right next to me, as if sensing my hesitation. He stopped us.
"What is it?"
I didn't run these operations. This was more of a Mason mission. He could have done this in his sleep with Nate and Logan, but it wasn't his idea. It had been mine. And feeling a little bereft, I admitted, I don't know how to get even with him. He peeled up his mask so I could see his eyes. He dipped his head down so we could see each other clear.
"What do you mean?"
I explained my doubts and handed him my phone. "I have those ready to play, but I don't think they're enough."
"What's your goal?"
I shrugged. Get an image of him actually crapping his pants, give it to that girl in class so she can use it against him if she wants. I'm not the best at these things. A faint smile spread over his face, and he leaned close, pressing a kiss to my forehead.
"I have a distinct memory of you throwing a firecracker in your dad's car, shutting the door, and getting back in mine."
"Oh, yeah." I grinned. I forgot about that. The ski mask was taken off. My phone and bag were with Mason, and as I walked down the row toward Yearly's section of the maze, Mason was slipping up in the rows to the side. I heard Mason's voice in my head as Yearly stepped out in front of me, waiting for me.
"Guys like that, you can't scare them."
Okay, check. Yearly thought I was a regular customer, and he lifted his chainsaw. A light flared from behind him, illuminating both of us so he was able to see my face. He faltered, his eyes widening.
"Stratton?"
Mason was right. I saw a cocky flare that lit up in Yearly's eyes, but behind it was a hardness, too. It went perfectly with his costume. Decked out in a ripped-up old mechanic's uniform, red dye or paint was splattered all over him and went all the way into his hair. He looked different from how he looked in class. Normally he was dressed in brand-name jeans and shirts, his hair an unruly mess because it was the in style. Basically, he always looked like a stereotypical fraternity brother. I had no idea, but I wouldn't have been surprised to go to his fraternity and find a picture of him wearing a button-up shirt, a V-neck sweater tied around his shoulders, and his hair perfectly combed to the side. Lawrence Yearly was handsome, but that was it. He wasn't mouth-wateringly gorgeous like Mason. He wasn't the reformed player with a wicked glint in his eyes like Logan. He wasn't in their league, and it was a fact Lawrence Yearly knew, which was probably why suspicion flared, shrouding over his eyes as I raised a hand. "Hey, Lawrence."
If you want to scare them, you have to fully commit. It takes time. It takes commitment. It takes the willingness to cross over a boundary I know you don't want to cross.
Mason shook his head, watching Yearly's section from the shadows before he nodded.
Okay, I have an idea.
You remember what you said to me the first day of classes? I stopped right in front of him, putting some frostiness in my tone. I chewed the inside of my cheek.
You need to use what he gives you, what kind of guy he is.
Yearly pissed me off. I was embracing that feeling, letting him see some of it, but I wasn't letting him know where it was coming from. His eyes narrowed, staring at me hard as his forehead crinkled in confusion.
Yeah, why?
Ask me again.
He's cocky, he has an ego, he likes sex.
I had agreed with all three things Mason had said, and then he had added,
but he likes power most of all. That's what you're going to use against him.
Yearly's voice was flat.
Did Cade cheat on you yet?
There it was. I looked a little harder, and I saw what Mason said.
Dangle me in front of him. Guys like him salivate at the idea of getting another guy's girl. They look at you like things, like objects. They want to steal you away from guys like me.
I hadn't needed Mason to explain how guys like him and his brother were viewed by guys like Yearly. They were better than them, and Yearly knew it.
They judge guys by money, power, and height.
Mason bested him in all three things. He was wealthy not from only his father's trust fund, but also from his contract with the Patriots. He had fame, which gave him power, and he was an inch taller than Yearly. Yearly was looking at me differently. His eyes slid down my body and then back up. He leaned forward just a centimeter, but it was enough. I was hooking him, just like Mason said I would.
And lastly, they judge guys by the women they have. You're an it girl.
An it girl? I had laughed. Mason hadn't. His face had become a cement mask.
You're the girl most guys want, the one they dream about having, and you're mine. Give him an indication you're upset with me, because that makes sense to them. They cheat, so they think all girls cheat. They lie, so they assume everyone lies. They're willing to do horrible things to another human being because they think everyone has it in them to do it. They don't believe everyone will do it, just that every person has it in them to do it.
He held his hand out.
Show 'em you have nothing on you. Show 'em you have no pockets.
Which I didn't. My pants had no pockets, and I only wore a long-sleeved shirt. I held my hands up, showing Yearly I had nothing there. I run these hills for my training, and I dropped my phone somewhere. He glanced up, as if he could see the trail I took.
And you were running tonight?
What? I laughed, making sure it was breezy and slightly husky-sounding. No. I went for a walk. I looked away, hugging myself, acting the part. I was upset. And then I saw the maze and remembered you mentioned in class that you were the chainsaw guy tonight.
Yeah.
His eyes flicked down to the chainsaw in his hands and back to me. He straightened, his shoulders back, his head up. He was almost taking the same stance Mason did before we came down here,
like we were going off to battle. The difference between the two was that Mason was dangerous in a way Yearly wasn't. Mason would follow through, destroying everything and anyone for someone he loved. Yearly was dangerous in that he would hurt someone weaker than he was, did hurt people weaker than he was. That girl in class, she was why I was there. Okay, truth time, Samantha. I needed to be honest with myself. That girl in class wasn't the whole reason I came out here. Yes, my demons were laid to rest. Yes, I had healed those wounds. But I was in this corn maze because it wasn't just that girl. It was the girl after her, another girl, maybe a woman, maybe his wife. I didn't know Yearly. I didn't know the extent of how he could hurt someone, but I felt it in my gut. He had, he did, and he would again. I was out there for them too.
So what did Kay do to piss you off?
God, a shiver went down my spine. Just in that tone from him, like it was inevitable, like Mason couldn't help himself, like he sympathized with him. You know that girl in class? He stilled, his mouth losing the smirk to flatten into a disapproving line.
What girl?
You know, the one you were flirting with this week? Not flirting, harassing. His shoulders relaxed a little and he nodded, the movement more fluid.
Yeah, her name's Brittany.
Brittany. I felt a pang in my chest. I wished I had found out her name myself instead of having to learn it from him. Yeah. But I didn't sound like that. I sounded almost seductive, coy. I checked Mason's Instagram. She's been sending him pictures of herself in his DMs. I had laughed when Mason told me that. I don't know your password, are you for real?
But he would. If you were his girlfriend, he'd know every password you had, and the sooner the better.
Are you joking? Mason sighed, some of the cement walls softening around his mouth.
He cheats, so he assumes the girl will cheat. So he'll control her to make sure she doesn't. He doesn't understand that you trust me, so you don't know my passwords.
He reached out, tugging me to him, and bent down. His mouth nuzzled my neck a moment before he whispered,
But you should know that my password is your full future name.
He pressed a kiss there before stepping back, nodding in Yearly's direction.
Go. I'll be following behind you, behind this corn row.
I had shivered then, too. You'll be with me?
Always. Just in the shadows.
And I looked, my eyes trailing past Yearly's shoulder to find Mason standing in the shadows. His eyes held mine, and I saw all the goodness in him that wasn't in Yearly's eyes, and I thanked God for that. Yearly barked out a laugh. It was harsh, almost making me jump from how abrupt it was.
Stratton, I hate to break it to you, but I'm sure your boy's been doing worse things than just getting titty shots sent to him.
A whole new burn was starting in my gut. Of course he'd think they were those types of images. I forced a laugh, keeping it sharp, like I was mad at her. Yeah, well, those titties might just end up in more places than Mason's DM by the end of the night. His eyes grew keen, and he leaned another centimeter closer.
Yeah? What do you mean?
Play it cool, Sam, I told myself. I was reeling him in, but I didn't want to lose him by going too fast. I rocked back on my heels, shrugging. I don't know, you tell me. Give me some dirt on her, you must know something. Tell me something you did to her. Give me dirt we can use on you, please. He didn't answer. He was silent. A second passed, another. 5 seconds. And when I was about to burst to the 8th second, he grunted,
You want to know something dirty about the girl?
Yeah. He fell for it. I could hear it in his voice. Surrender, but also eagerness and enjoyment. Fuck's sakes, Mason had been right. Yearly wanted to tell me about this girl. He wanted to show off, and I felt 7 layers of dirt inside because whatever he was about to say, I knew he had imagined doing worse to me. I felt it in my core.
Okay.
He beckoned to me, like he was the one pulling me in on a fishing line.
Come here, though. I don't want to say this too loudly.
A bolt of panic seared my chest, But Yearly was looking past me, and I settled. He was looking for other people to be walking the maze, and remembering them, I was surprised that no one had come along and interrupted us. I scooted closer, turning to the side so he was facing me, and his voice was clearer to Mason. "Tell me. I need something more on her. I want to make her life hell."
"You will."
He licked his lips. I threw up in my mouth. Okay, not really, but the sentiment was there. He dropped his voice low.
"I have pictures of her."
"What?" I reared back, but only a little before I caught myself and leaned close again, remembering that I was supposed to have pictures of her too. Pictures of what?
"My buddy knows her."
He was pulling his phone out.
"They went to the same school together, and a guy she was with there shared a bunch of images."
The sick feeling was back, crawling up my chest. "Yeah?" I forced myself to look what he showed me on his screen. I broke for her. She was smiling at the camera, waving. She was exposed, naked, and vulnerable, but it was in her eyes, too. She adored whoever was taking that image. Her boyfriend took that of her? He snorted, flicking through some more photos.
"As if. The dude just poked her a few times, gave her a ride every now and then, nothing serious."
"Right." I couldn't keep the bite out of my tone. I tried, but I just couldn't. His head snapped up, his eyes narrowed.
"What, you pissed about that?"
"No." "Lies, Stratton. He was nothing compared to others you've gone against, and just like that, a smooth lie came out of me. It isn't enough. I need something else, something worse." I was eyeing him, biting my lip. "What about you? You're always flirting with her. You and her ever do anything?" He stiffened, a mask walling up over his face as he stared at me intensely. Then it dropped and he jerked up a shoulder.
"What kind of dirt are you talking about?"
"Any, honestly. Don't make anything up, though."
"I wouldn't."
He sounded offended. I fought against rolling my eyes.
"Okay, yeah."
He was nodding to himself, making a decision.
"She and I just joke in class. You know how it is. But yeah, there was one time after class, she was going to the bathroom and she looked back, gave me the nod to follow her."
"Nod?"
"Well, she looked at me."
"Did she wave or anything?"
"Nah, but it was in the look, you know. You were looking at me the same the first day of school."
Puke, vomit, bile, all of it was flaring up in my sternum, threatening to spew. I looked at him with distaste. "Really?"
"Yeah."
He oozed slime.
"You know it." But anyway, so I followed her in the bathroom and locked the door.
I didn't want to hear this. I really didn't. But I didn't react. I waited.
"And yeah, we fooled around for a bit in there. Is that good enough for you?"
I needed more. I already knew that, but I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to know, because then it would be with me, too. I forced out, "No, I need details. What happened?"
"She went down. You know."
He made a motion with his hand, and I knew what he meant, but I still forced the words out. "She went on her own?"
"No. I mean, I had to push her down, but she likes it rough. I mean, that was all it was. I let her leave afterward, but come on, she liked it. That's probably what she'll do to Cade if he hits her back. But Stratton, and I don't talk like this lightly, but that man of yours probably has hotter pieces hitting him up. He's in the pros. Honestly, I'm shocked you're still in school. Thought you'd stay to keep an eye on him, try to keep him in line."
A red light waved behind him, Mason signaling that he had enough. Yearly pushed her down. She liked it rough. He let her leave. And the big kicker? She looked at him. It might not be enough to convict him of anything, but it was enough to notify the school officials they had a big fucking problem on their hands. I nodded, almost falling back in my rush to get away from Yearly.
"What?"
Then Mason stepped out, right between Yearly and me. I could see Yearly shrink back, and it was then I let the coward part of me take over. I gripped the back of Mason's shirt and pressed my forehead to him. I needed to touch goodness, but it wasn't enough.
My mind was running rampant. I could imagine the truth between the lines, what Yearly had really done. I molded completely to Mason's back and held on. I just held on.
I got all of that on tape, and I forwarded the copy to Nate and one to Logan, so now it's their decision too. And I have a good feeling Sam will want a copy for herself, and she'll send one to that girl you followed into the bathroom.
Sam would be there for her if she decided to go to the authorities. And if she didn't, I'd let Sam and Logan make that decision. They were the ones living here, but I knew my family. They'd want the fucker to burn. Mason's voice was rough, but there was real danger lurking underneath. His body was rigid, not an inch soft or relaxed. He was fighting to keep himself from launching at him. I knew Mason. I knew if Yearly said too much, he'd react, and then it could be Mason's future in jeopardy. He had changed. Violence was behind him, but I could feel that lying being pushed inside him.
Sam wanted to come out here today because she wanted to scare you. She wanted some fun revenge on you for what you've been doing to that girl. I don't know her. I don't know you. But I know the situation. I know the type of guy you are, and I know your type likes to prey on girls. You don't like women like Sam, who stand up and fight back, who say no. And I could go on a whole spiel, telling you exactly what kind of a piece of shit you are, but I'm not trusting myself right now.
His voice broke, and his hands curled into fists. I slid a hand down, catching his and intertwining our fingers. His entire chest lifted up and went back down, and just like that, he felt more in control. He felt steadier.
When you think about getting some revenge later, you need to remember a few things. You need to remember me. You need to remember Logan. You need to remember our reputations, and you need to remember we have that reputation for a good goddamn reason.
He softened his voice, making it sound almost eerie from the promise there.
Even think of hurting Sam, and I will end you.
He tightened his hold on my hand and pulled me with him so we could disappear into the rows of corn. We moved fast and hard, the corn almost whipping us from the speed we were going. It took a second to realize what was going on. He wanted us out of there because there were only two of us, and Yearly had all of his brothers back there. I moved beside him, and we broke through the last row. We were outside of the maze, and I took the lead. My feet picked up. The need to run was at my back, spurring me on, and as I hurried up my pace, so did Mason. It wasn't long before we were mounting the hill where our night had started, and I knew there was no way they could catch us. No one could. I was training for the Olympics, and Mason was in the National Football League. We were too fast. When we got up the trail and made it to his Escalade, I thought back over what just transpired. I hadn't intended for that to happen tonight. I didn't know how bad he was, the extent of what he had done to Brittany, but I knew that somehow we had helped. That felt damned good. Mason held my hand the drive back to the house. We didn't talk much, but then I remembered what he said, and I laughed. Your passwords are my name? Samantha Jacqueline Stratton? He smiled.
No. Samantha Jacqueline Cade.
And that felt damned good, too.
We hope you've enjoyed this production of Fallen Crest Nightmare by Tijan. This program was produced by John Marshall Media. Text copyright 2018 by Tijan. Production copyright 2018 by Macmillan Audio. All rights reserved.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.